Hi guys. Tonight we slip back in time to a world of frozen fields and crooked cottages, where the smoke from peat fires curls into the grey December sky. You can almost feel the chill bite your fingertips as you pull your cloak tighter. Snow clings to the thatched roofs, turning every hut into a sugar-dusted loaf. The year is somewhere in the late Middle Ages, long before anyone ever dreamed of fairy lights or plastic Santas. Out here, on the edge of the known world, Christmas means something far deeper and rougher. It smells of roasting meat, damp straw, and smoke-stained wool. You probably wouldn't survive this winter, but let's imagine you do. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you can, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. The first breath of morning is sharp enough to sting. You trudge down a muddy lane that crunches beneath a thin crust of ice. Chickens shuffle in their coops, cows snort clouds into the cold air, and the whole village hums with the low, sleepy rhythm of survival. The scent of burning oak and damp wool fills your lungs. It's nearly Christmas week, and though your boots leak, there's a spark of warmth inside you, a whisper of excitement. This is the one time of year when even the poorest souls get to taste something close to joy. The hamlet around you isn't much, a cluster of maybe 20 homes, each made of wattle and daub, walls patched with mud and straw. The thatch above is browned and uneven, crawling with moss. Inside, the floors are dirt. Still, this is home. You duck through a low door into a single smoky room. It's dim, with a central fire pit glowing under a hanging cauldron. Smoke curls upward through a hole in the roof. On the wall, dried herbs hang beside a rosary, a quiet balance between superstition and faith. Outside, the world is half dead. The fields lie frozen under a skin of frost, the last cabbages drooping like green ghosts. Livestock huddle close for warmth. Yet in this bleakness, something stirs. The villagers are cleaning, fixing, mending, because Christmas approaches. It's not a single day here, it's a season of permission, a pause in the endless grind of work. Soon there will be songs, ale, laughter, and maybe a little sin. You can sense it in the way everyone moves, faster now, more hopeful, as if even the oxen understand that something holy is coming. You step outside and watch the morning light creep over the fields. Children chase one another through the frost, their breath like tiny ghosts. The older ones carry logs on their shoulders, dragging them toward the Lord's manor for the great Yule fire. That log is more than just wood, it's protection. People believe it carries luck for the year ahead, especially if it burns all through the night. Some will even save a charred piece to start next year's fire. Historians still argue whether this tradition came from pagan winter solstice rites or early Christian customs, but either way, it's sacred now. The sounds of the village rise slowly. A dog barks, an iron pot clangs, the bell at the small wooden church tolls once, a reminder that even joy requires prayer. Across the way you spot the reeve part mayor, part enforcer counting bundles of firewood owed to the Lord. He looks cold and miserable, yet proud. Everyone owes something, even in celebration. But today, no one minds. The air smells of promise. You wander past the smithy, where a blacksmith hammers a red-hot horseshoe. Sparks leap like orange fireflies. He pauses long enough to grin and mutter, "Soon be Yule, eh?" His voice cracks with smoke and ale. He has a small sprig of holly pinned to his tunic. Even the toughest men allow themselves a touch of decoration this week. By midday, the village square fills with motion. Women carry baskets of bread, their aprons white with flour. Men drag barrels of ale into the meeting hall, each one thumping down with a hollow echo. Children trail behind them, eyes wide at the thought of sweets or maybe a slice of roasted meat. A stray goose wanders through the crowd, pecking at crumbs. It's chaos, but cheerful chaos. You realize that for once, no one is working for a lord or tithing to a church. They're working for themselves, for their neighbors. There's a particular smell that defines this time of year. Smoke, fat, and pine. Someone's burning green wood, and the crackling fills your ears. You glance up at the sky, flat grey, heavy with snow, and feel oddly peaceful. The year is ending, and so is the long stretch of hunger. You don't think about next year's taxes or bad harvests. Not tonight. Tonight, you think about warmth, song, and the hope of meat. A group of boys run past, dragging a makeshift sled built from a broken barrel and some rope. They shout something about catching the Yule pig, laughing as they tumble into the snow. The sound makes even the old folks smile. It's rare to hear laughter in the dead of winter, and it carries through the air like music. Later, as dusk settles, the cottages glow from within. Candlelight flickers through oiled parchment windows. You duck inside one and find a family gathered near the hearth. The father mends a wooden stool, the mother kneads dough, and the eldest daughter hums an old tune that might be centuries older than Christ himself. Some say it's a pagan song dressed in holy words. Historians still debate whether early churchmen banned or blessed such carols. Either way, no one here is thinking of heresy. They're thinking of dinner. The evening grows darker, colder. The smell of stew fills the air. Outside, snow begins to fall again, soft and silent, coating everything in a fragile peace. You sit by the fire, the crackle lulling you into a drowsy calm. The mother ladles out broth thick with onions and barley. She sets a wooden bowl in your hands. You sip. It's hot, salty, simple, and perfect. Around you, the family talks in low voices about the week ahead. The church service, the feasting, the games. Even the grandmother, wrapped in wool and age, smiles at the thought of dancing. You glance out through the tiny window. The moon has risen, pale and enormous, shining down on the frozen fields. Somewhere beyond them, wolves howl, faint and distant, but inside, it's warm. You can almost forget that this is a hard world, a world where hunger and sickness wait just beyond the door. For now, there's peace, and tomorrow there will be joy. The fire pops. A log splits, sending up a shower of sparks. Someone laughs softly. Someone yawns. You close your eyes and let the warmth sink into your bones. Outside, the snow thickens, muffling every sound until the whole village feels like it's sleeping under a blanket of white. In the stillness, you understand why this festival matters so much. It's not about gifts or kings or miracles. It's about survival and the strange, stubborn joy of being alive when the world feels like it's ending. You wake before dawn, though it hardly feels like morning. The sky is still the colour of soot, and the cold bites harder than before. A rooster cries somewhere beyond the cottages, its voice cracking in the frost. This is the season of Advent, the waiting time before the great feast, and every villager feels its slow, hungry pull. You pull your cloak close and step outside. The air tastes sharp, metallic almost, and each breath sends a ghost of vapour into the dark. The church bell rings once, a dull note that rolls across the frozen fields. It is not a summons for work, but for prayer. The priest believes that every soul must prepare for Christmas with quiet thought and empty stomach. You have been fasting, as all must, though your belly grumbles its protests. Advent is supposed to teach patience, humility, and faith, but to you, it feels mostly like cold fingers and thin broth. Even so, there's a strange comfort in the shared hunger. Everyone around you looks the same, lean, tired, hopeful. By day they work in the same icy fields. By night they kneel in the same dim chapel, whispering prayers into the cold. Inside the little church, candles flicker against the rough wooden walls. The wax runs like tears down iron holders. You kneel on straw that crunches softly beneath your knees. The priest's Latin rolls through the air, low and steady, words you do not understand but somehow feel in your bones. He speaks of light returning to darkness, of faith tested by frost. It sounds like poetry, though he probably means it as warning. After the service, you shuffle outside with the others. The sun has not yet risen, but there is a faint silver glow at the horizon. You notice how the older women carry their rosaries like talismans, while the young men sneak glances at them, already thinking of the dances to come. Even during fasting, the human heart finds mischief. Historians still argue whether medieval Advent was more spiritual or social, more about penance or the slow teasing of pleasure before release. Maybe it was both. Maybe that's what makes it so human. Back in the cottages, smoke rises once again. The smell of boiling cabbage and oats drifts through the lanes. You follow it to a small kitchen where a woman stirs a pot with a wooden ladle. She smiles without looking up. "Barely enough to fill a belly," she says. "But it'll keep us upright till the feast." The children beside her wait with wide eyes, spoons ready, patient but trembling with hunger. You can tell this meal means survival, not satisfaction. Outside, a thin wind rattles the door. It hums through the cracks, making the whole room shiver. You sip your bowl of gruel, thick and bland, and try to imagine the banquet that will come at Christmas. Meat, bread, ale, laughter. It feels like a dream. Yet that dream keeps everyone moving. It's strange how hope can taste better than food. In the afternoons, the village slows. There is little work to do now that the fields sleep. Some men mend tools. Others patch their roofs or carve small toys from scraps of wood. The women weave and spin, humming hymns that sound older than the church itself. Occasionally, someone tells a story of miracles of saints who healed the blind, or of shepherds who saw angels. A few still whisper of things less holy, of fairies that hide in the winter woods, or spirits that visit cold hearths. The priest disapproves, of course, but he cannot stop the old beliefs from flickering like embers beneath the new faith. One evening the priest himself visits the cottages. He carries a small lantern and speaks softly about repentance. He tells each family to keep their hearts pure, to confess before the holy day arrives. He is gentle but watchful, his breath steaming in the lamplight. When he leaves, the room feels quieter, heavier. Yet as soon as his footsteps fade, someone chuckles and breaks the silence. Pure hearts, eh? He'd better start with his own. Laughter ripples through the room, small and rebellious. Later, you walk through the village again. Frost glitters like powdered glass on every roof. The air is still, almost sacred. You pass the church, where a single candle burns in the window. Inside, the altar gleams with new cloth, embroidered by the women in secret hours. Every stitch a prayer, every thread a gift. It's a beautiful thought that even the poorest can offer something made by hand. You notice how quiet everything feels. The usual noise of the blacksmith's hammer, the chatter of gossip, even the dogs barking, all subdued. It's as if the whole world holds its breath. This is Advent's true rhythm. Restraint, waiting, reverence. You start to feel it settle inside you too. The hunger dulls, replaced by something like calm. When night comes, the stars are so sharp they almost hurt your eyes. You lie awake on your straw bed, listening to the faint sounds of the village. Somewhere, a baby cries. Somewhere else, someone hums a lullaby. You stare at the rafters and imagine the warmth of the coming feast. The thought wraps around you like a blanket. Still, not everyone obeys the fasting. You hear whispers of those who sneak bites of bacon or sip ale in the dark. The reeve pretends not to notice as long as the priest doesn't find out. Even holiness has loopholes. One old man jokes that fasting keeps him young because his body is too empty to age. You laugh quietly at that, even as your stomach growls. Tomorrow, the priest will bless the candles for the season, melting old wax into new. He says the light of Advent must burn steady, symbol of hope in the darkest days. You think about that as you drift towards sleep. Maybe the light is not only in the candles, but in the people themselves, thin, tired, shivering, yet still laughing, still waiting for joy. You dream of food, of warmth, of bells ringing across the snow. Somewhere in that dream, a voice tells you the waiting is nearly over. The frost has deepened, clinging to every branch and shutter, yet the village feels more alive than it did a week ago. The air smells of pine resin and damp earth, for this is the time when you and your neighbors begin to bring the forest indoors. Evergreen branches hang from doorways, woven into wreaths and garlands. The world may be asleep under snow, but inside each home, green life creeps back in. You carry a bundle of ivy and holly through the lane, your hands sticky with sap. The leaves gleam even in the dim light, waxy and stubbornly alive. In the middle of December, that feels like a small miracle. According to surviving parish records, villagers in England, France, and Germany all decorated their cottages with evergreens during this season, long before such things became symbols of Christmas trees. The greenery reminded everyone that life could outlast winter. The women choose the ivy because it clings, twisting itself into anything it touches, a quiet emblem of endurance. The men prefer holly for its red berries, proof that beauty can bloom in hardship. The prickly leaves also serve a practical purpose, hanging over doorways to keep out wandering spirits, or so the stories go. One curious little custom you notice is that the holly brought in by a man must be matched with ivy brought in by a woman. Otherwise, the coming year will tilt toward misfortune. Children laugh as they drag in more branches, faces red from the cold. Some of them hum the same simple tune, a winter chant passed down through generations. No one remembers who taught it first, or even what it means, but the melody carries a feeling of comfort older than any sermon. Research continue to puzzle over whether these folk songs began as Christian hymns or as fragments of pagan ritual that the church quietly allowed to survive. Either way, they warm the cold air with sound. You step into one of the cottages to help hang the garlands. Inside, the heat of the hearth wraps around you. The scent of pine mingles with that of baking bread. Smoke curls lazily toward the rafters, tracing lines across the low ceiling. The walls are dark and rough, yet the greenery transforms them, a soft shimmer of life against soot and mud. A small wooden cross sits above the door, draped now with ivy. It looks both humble and holy. A grandmother adjusts a bunch of mistletoe over the hearth. She gives you a sly look and says, "If you stand beneath it, you'll owe someone a kiss." You laugh, though your cheeks burn. She winks. That custom may not be as old as she thinks, but people cling to it all the same. Chroniclers of the time describe how mistletoe carried mixed feelings. Sacred to the old druids, suspicious to the priests, yet irresistible to the young. Even in an age of fasting and prayer, affection finds its loopholes. As evening settles, you step outside again. The snow has begun to fall lightly, soft flakes glowing in the firelight from cottage windows. Every doorway gleams with green, every lintel bristles with holly. The whole village seems alive, as if the forest has moved in to keep watch. A few villagers murmur that if the ivy droops before the new year, illness will follow. Nobody wants to test it, so the plants are watered with melted snow. In the center of the village, the priest passes by, his cloak heavy and damp. He stops to inspect the decorations, frowning at the mistletoe but nodding at the holly. "Keep it clean of superstition," he warns softly, though his breath smells faintly of ale. The villagers nod and smile, but when he turns away, they quietly add another sprig of ivy to the church door. It is said that even priests, after enough years here, stop fighting the forest. A delightful oddity from the time says that some villagers whispered to their plants at night, asking them to guard the home from evil. Whether prayer or spell, no one can say, but every leaf seems to listen. In a world where storms could take your roof and sickness could steal your child, a whisper to the greenery felt harmless, maybe even wise. Later that night, the fire burns low. You lie on your straw bed watching shadows from the holly branches dance across the wall. The flickering leaves cast tiny claw shapes that sway with the draft. You imagine they are little guardians, keeping the frost from crawling too deep into your bones. Somewhere outside, an owl calls, slow and distant. The sound echoes through the stillness. Most medieval accounts agree that these small rituals, gathering green, hanging holly, singing old tunes, were as important as the great feast itself. They brought life into places where life had vanished. To touch something living in midwinter was to believe, for a moment, that spring would return. You fall asleep to the smell of pine and ash, the crackle of the last burning log fading into silence. The house creaks as it cools. A faint glow lingers where the fire had been. You think about how strange it is that centuries later, people will still be doing the same thing, bringing trees indoors, hanging garlands, filling rooms with green when the world outside lies white and dead. Maybe that's the real miracle of Christmas, not the feast or the gifts, but the stubborn refusal to let the dark have the final word. The morning sun is pale and cold, glinting off the layer of frost that covers everything like glass. Your breath rises in clouds as you join the others outside the cottage. Today is slaughter day, and though the smell will turn your stomach, everyone in the village depends on what happens next. The pigs in their pens grunt softly, unaware of the fate that waits. This is not cruelty. This is survival. It is well recorded that in December, just before Christmas, most villages across Europe slaughtered their animals for the winter. The cold kept the meat from spoiling, and the feast that followed was as close to luxury as any peasant could hope for. You grip the wooden fence and watch as the men gather with their knives and buckets, faces red from cold and drink. The reeve calls out blessings, though the words sound more like habit than holiness. The sound comes quickly, the squeal, the hush, the thud, and then the air fills with the scent of blood and smoke. You look away, but not for long. No one can afford to waste a thing. Children hurry forward with bowls and cloths, collecting fat and scraps. The women already prepare the boiling cauldrons for rendering lard. It is a grisly, busy ballet, done with the precision of long practice. One curious little detail about this ritual is the way villagers used to smear a drop of pig's blood on the threshold. They believed it would keep away illness through the dark months. It sounds macabre now, but to them, it was protection. The blood marked the home as alive, sharing in the strength of the animal that had just fed them. Some whispered that skipping the gesture would invite bad luck or even famine. The butchering continues for hours. By midday, the yard is strewn with straw, feathers, and the glint of knives. The smell is thick, metallic, and oddly comforting. You begin to see why the peasants look almost cheerful. For once, they have plenty. There will be salted meat, sausages, broth, even fat for candles. The children dart about carrying pieces to the smokehouse. Everyone is part of this ritual of transformation, turning death into warmth, scarcity into hope. According to surviving manorial accounts, a portion of the meat always went to the Lord's kitchen, a reminder that even in celebration, the poor owed tribute. Yet the Lord also sent gifts in return, perhaps a jug of wine or a wheel of cheese. The exchange kept the fragile peace of the village. No one spoke of fairness, but everyone knew the rules. You help string strips of meat in the smokehouse. The air inside is thick with haze. The logs crackle beneath hanging slabs of bacon, and droplets of fat hiss as they fall into the fire. The scent makes your stomach twist with hunger. Someone hands you a slice of freshly cooked liver, still sizzling, and you take it without hesitation. It's salty, smoky, and unbelievably rich. For the first time in weeks, your body feels alive. Later, as the sun sets, the bloodied snow glows pink in the fading light. The men wash their hands in buckets of icy water, laughing as they pour the last of the ale into wooden cups. One man, already unsteady, raises his drink and shouts, "To the pig who feeds us all!" Laughter erupts around him. You drink too, though the ale tastes like bitter bread. It burns pleasantly as it goes down. No one wastes the remains. The hide will be scraped and dried for shoes, the bones boiled for broth, the fat turned into soap and candles. Even the bladder finds a purpose tied off and dried. It becomes a toy ball for the children. It's oddly touching to see a toddler kicking something that was part of dinner only hours ago. Some chroniclers from the 14th century wrote that villagers viewed this day as both sacred and dangerous. Blood called blessings, but it could also call trouble if spilled carelessly. To spill it on church ground was a curse. To spill it on frozen soil was fortune. Even centuries later, no one fully understands where that belief came from, though scholars suggest it may have roots in ancient harvest rites. As night falls, you follow the others into the main hall, where the first small feast begins. A pot of stew bubbles on the hearth, thick with meat and onions. The room glows with light from tallow candles, their sweet, greasy scent mixing with the steam. Children curl up by the fire, too full to talk. The older folk hum softly, the tune slow and soothing. A researcher once remarked that this day, the day of the slaughter, captured the entire contradiction of medieval life: brutality and gratitude, faith and fear, death and renewal. Watching the villagers now, you see how true that is. They bless their food with one hand and drink to their own survival with the other. When you finally step back outside, the stars are sharp in the black sky. The snow crunches under your boots. Behind you, laughter spills from the hall, muffled by the cold air. You feel something stirring in your chest, not quite joy, not quite sadness. Maybe it's relief. The worst of winter is still ahead, but tonight, everyone has eaten, and that's enough. You pause beside the fence where the pigs had been. The ground is hard and red. The air is utterly still now. Except for the faint crackle of the fires. You look up at the moon and realize that tomorrow, the same people who held knives today will kneel in church and pray for mercy. And somehow, both things will make perfect sense. The frost sparkles in the morning light as if the world has been sprinkled with crushed glass. Your breath steams in front of you while you walk toward the ale shed behind the tavern. Inside, the air is warm and rich with the smell of malt and yeast. A group of villagers stands around a massive wooden vat, laughing as they stir a bubbling mixture with long paddles. It is brewing day, and the mood feels different now, less grim, more hopeful. According to the few records that survive, brewing was one of the most important communal tasks in medieval villages, especially around Christmas. Each household contributed barley or oats, and the brew was shared freely or almost freely during the 12 days of celebration. The ale was thick, dark, and often sweet, flavored with honey or herbs instead of hops. For peasants, it was both drink and food, a safe replacement for water and a source of strength in the cold. You watch as a woman named Agnes tosses dried rosemary into the vat. "Keeps the evil spirits out," she says with a grin. You're not sure whether she means it seriously, but no one argues. In a world where sickness and misfortune seem to have minds of their own, why risk it? One curious little habit is that some brewers carved small crosses into their stirring paddles before beginning, believing that would make the ale stronger and less likely to sour. The mixture bubbles and steams. The smell is intoxicating, sharp and earthy. The men taste it with wooden spoons, humming in approval. Children gather near the door, pretending to help, but mostly hoping for a sip. A few will get one. By the end of the day, nearly everyone will be slightly tipsy, and no one will think that strange. Most accounts from the period suggest that alewives, women who brewed and sold ale, were central figures in village life. They were business women in a world that rarely allowed women much independence. The church tolerated them, but only just. Too much profit or too much laughter, and the priest would accuse them of vanity or sin. Some historians can't quite agree on whether these women were seen as respected providers or suspicious figures walking too close to witchcraft. Either way, everyone depended on them. The process is slow. Barley must soak, boil, and cool before it's strained. You help carry heavy buckets of water from the well, your arms aching. Each bucket steams in the freezing air. The smell grows richer, heavier, almost sweet. Someone begins to sing a rough, rhythmic tune about St. Nicholas and his ale-loving monks. Soon everyone joins in, stamping their boots to the beat. It's not a hymn exactly, but it feels like one. Inside the tavern, the first barrels from last week's brew are already being tapped. The floor is packed with villagers. Smoke from the fire rolls across the beams, and the laughter bounces off the walls. A fiddler plays in the corner, his fingers red from cold. You find yourself swaying to the rhythm, the warmth of the ale spreading through your chest. One charming superstition says that if the first drop of new ale spills on the floor, it must be left there for luck. To mop it up would insult the spirit of the drink. So, naturally, someone knocks over a cup on purpose, laughing as it splashes across the stones. The priest pretends not to notice. As the day darkens into evening, the villagers share jugs around the tables. They toast to the harvest, to their animals, to the babies born, and the old ones lost. Each toast feels like a small prayer dressed in laughter. According to local chronicles, this mixture of devotion and drunkenness was a constant source of frustration for the clergy. Yet even bishops admitted that a Christmas without ale was hardly Christmas at all. You lean against the wall, cup in hand, feeling the warmth creep into your limbs. Outside, snow falls again, soft and soundless. The fire crackles. Someone begins another song, this one slower, about a sailor who trades his soul for a barrel of beer. The crowd joins in on the chorus, voices rough but joyful. Toward the end of the night, a young boy climbs onto a stool and declares himself Lord of the Ale, wearing a crown of straw and holly. The room bursts into applause. He orders everyone to drink more, and they obey him, half in jest, half in gratitude for the excuse. The reeve laughs and pretends to kneel. It's harmless misrule, a little taste of rebellion before returning to the grind of daily life. You sip the last of your ale and feel a pleasant fog settle over your mind. The music fades to a hum, the laughter to murmurs. In the corner, two old men doze beside the fire, their mugs still in hand. The air is thick with smoke and comfort. It remains a mystery to modern historians whether medieval villagers truly believed that drink could sanctify a celebration or simply forgot their troubles more easily with full mugs. Either way, ale has become the pulse of the season, a humble alchemy that turns grain, water, and patience into joy. When you step outside at last, the cold air hits your face like a splash of water. The snow glows pale under the moonlight, and somewhere nearby you hear someone still singing, their voice echoing through the stillness. The world feels softer now. You smile, pulling your cloak tighter, and make your way home through the glittering frost. The warmth lingers in your belly long after the tavern lights fade behind you. The next morning, your head aches slightly from last night's ale, but the air outside is sharp enough to wake even the sleepiest soul. A pink glow stretches across the sky, hinting at another day of snow. The village is alive again, this time with purpose. Today, you're heading to the winter market, a gathering that turns a sleepy countryside into a swirl of colours, smells, and voices. You follow the others down a frozen track, your boots crunching on ruts of ice. A cart ahead creaks under sacks of wool and jars of honey. The sound of a distant bell drifts over the fields. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling the wind nibble at your face. It's a hard journey, but no one complains. For once, there will be music, goods from other villages, and the faint thrill of seeing strangers. It's well recorded that winter fairs were among the few times when medieval peasants could buy, sell, and trade freely, without direct interference from their lords. Even the poorest farmer might save a few coins for this day. The markets were temporary bursts of freedom, sanctioned chaos where wealth and poverty mixed without the usual barriers. As you reach the outskirts of the market, the smell hits first wood smoke, roasting chestnuts, animal dung, and freshly baked bread. Then the noise swells. Traders shouting prices, goats bleating, children laughing, and somewhere the rhythmic beat of a drum. Stalls line the square, their roofs sagging under frost. Lanterns sway in the breeze, painting the scene in shifting gold and shadow. You pause to take it all in. There's a butcher selling sausages still steaming in the cold, a woman from a nearby village offering ribbons dyed with berries, a monk peddling charms and relics. Some are real, some perhaps not. One curious little detail from old fair records mentions that even priests occasionally joined the bustle. selling indulgences or holy tokens to fund church repairs. Nobody seemed to mind the hypocrisy too much. A group of jugglers performs near the well, tossing wooden clubs into the air while the crowd cheers. Beside them, a fiddler scrapes a lively tune, and a few brave souls dance despite the cold. You find yourself smiling, the rhythm tugging at your feet. A child runs past, clutching a stick of sugar, rare and expensive, licking it like treasure. You can almost taste the sweetness in the air. At one corner of the square, a merchant displays spices from faraway lands: nutmeg, cinnamon, and cloves. The scent is intoxicating. You can hardly believe such things exist, let alone find their way here. Straight from Venice, the merchant insists, though his accent sounds local enough. According to surviving trade accounts, these rare spices often changed hands dozens of times before reaching villages like this. Each pinch was worth a small fortune. Nearby, a fortune teller in a patched cloak reads palms for a penny. Your luck rises with the snow, she tells one farmer, her eyes bright under the shadow of her hood. The crowd laughs, tossing her coins anyway. Folklorists note that such women were both feared and sought after, half healer, half entertainer. No one really believed them, yet everyone listened. You stop to buy a length of rough wool, trading a handful of barley for it. The seller nods approvingly, wrapping it in paper. The deal feels almost ceremonial, a reminder that even simple exchanges bind people together. Commerce, in its own way, is as holy as prayer out here. By midday, the square is packed. You spot familiar faces among strangers. The smith from your village, his apron still black with soot. The reeve arguing over the price of salt. A young couple holding hands shyly near a bread stall. For a moment, you forget the hardship of winter. The world feels bigger, brighter, full of possibility. One of the more amusing oddities of the medieval winter market was the sale of miracle trinkets, tiny clay charms shaped like pigs, angels, or even shoes. People believed they could bring luck, fertility, or better harvests. You pick one up, shaped like a small bird with painted wings. It feels rough but oddly comforting. The merchant tells you it will keep nightmares away if you hang it above your bed. You don't know if you believe him, but you buy it anyway. As the afternoon fades, snow begins to fall again, drifting gently through the lantern light. The air fills with music and laughter. Somewhere, a storyteller begins reciting a tale about Saint Martin and his enchanted horse. The crowd gathers close, faces glowing in the firelight. You listen, letting the rhythm of his voice carry you. Scholars today still puzzle over whether these winter fairs were more about trade or about preserving community spirit through shared imagination. Perhaps both were true. When the story ends, people cheer, toss a few coins, and begin their journey home. You wrap your new cloth tight around your shoulders and follow the others through the darkening lane. The snow crunches softly beneath your boots. Ahead, the village glows with firelight, its smoke rising into the violet sky. As you walk, you think about how fragile and beautiful this little world is. A handful of cottages, a few animals, a patch of frozen ground, and yet, in these short days, it feels enough. The fair might vanish by dawn, the laughter fade, but for now, everyone carries home a little spark of warmth, tucked away like a secret ember. You glance down at the small clay bird in your hand. Its wings are chipped, but its shape is sure. You smile, feeling the faintest flutter of hope. Tomorrow, life will return to its usual rhythm. But tonight, the memory of the market hums softly in your mind, like the last note of a song that refuses to fade. By the next evening, the village hums with a new kind of energy. The air is warmer inside the cottages, thick with smoke and laughter. Christmas draws closer, and along with it comes something the priest tries to contain but never truly can: the festival of misrule. It begins quietly, as many dangerous things do, with a joke, a wink, and a fool's crown woven from straw and holly. You stand near the door of the tavern, watching as the crowd cheers. A boy of 16 climbs onto a table, grinning from ear to ear. Someone places the makeshift crown on his head. The crowd roars its approval, shouting, "Hail the Lord of Misrule!" He bows dramatically, pretending to bless them all. For one night, order turns upside down. The humble become kings, and the pious become merry sinners. According to several medieval chronicles, this custom of appointing a Lord of Misrule was widespread throughout England and parts of France. The Church tolerated it, though uneasily. Priests called it a release valve for the poor, a way to let chaos breathe before returning to obedience. Still, it often got out of hand. The line between harmless play and real rebellion was thin as thread. You make your way inside. The tavern is packed, the smell of ale, sweat, and firewood wrapping around you like a heavy cloak. The tables are crowded with villagers, their faces flushed with drink. The newly crowned lord stands on the bench, his voice booming above the noise. "By the power of nonsense I command laughter," he cries. The crowd obeys with cheers that rattle the walls. A rather strange little custom unfolds next. The Fool King chooses his queen, usually a shy girl who blushes crimson as she's brought to stand beside him. Together they preside over the games, ordering mock punishments and ridiculous challenges. You see one man made to hop like a frog until he spills his cup, another forced to sing with his head wrapped in cloth. The laughter is wild, and even the priest, sitting stiffly in the corner, can't help but smile. It's worth noting that in this moment, the village is alive with contradiction. Everyone knows that by tomorrow they'll return to kneeling in church, to scraping the frost from the fields, to bowing their heads before the Reeve and the Lord. But tonight, they rule themselves. One chronicler wrote that this night allowed peasants to taste liberty safely. And looking around, you can feel how deeply that liberty matters. A local superstition adds its own charm to the evening. It is said that if the Lord of Misrule spills his drink 3 times, the coming year will bring storms and spoiled crops. So, naturally, the villagers do everything they can to make him spill it, laughing until tears stream down their faces. The Fool King clings to his mug with both hands, balancing like a ship in rough seas. He succeeds for a while, but finally trips over a dog. The ale splashes across the floor, and everyone groans as if the world has ended. Some researchers believe that this entire ritual had ancient roots, perhaps born from older solstice festivals that honored the turning of the year with wildness and parody. Nobody's entirely sure, though. It might simply be that humans have always needed one night to forget who's in charge. You watch as the mock king is hoisted on shoulders, carried outside into the snow, his laughter echoing into the night. The stars are clear and sharp above the roofs. Torches flare in the cold air. People sing a rough tune, part hymn, part drinking song. The rhythm is infectious, and before long you're singing too. Even the Reeve, red-faced and staggering, joins the chorus. For once, the hierarchy dissolves completely. Everyone is just a voice in the dark, rising together against the cold. When the singing fades, the crowd spills back into the tavern. A roast goose turns slowly over the fire, its fat dripping and hissing in the flames. The smell makes your mouth water. Children peek in from the doorway, their eyes shining. The Lord of Misrule, now seated like a king, declares that everyone must dance before eating. A fiddler tunes his strings, and soon the benches are pushed aside. The floorboards thump under stomping feet. You dance too, spinning in the smoky air until your legs ache. The laughter is endless. Someone hands you a mug, someone else slaps your shoulder. It's chaos, but the best kind. Even the priest, still trying to look disapproving, ends up tapping his foot to the rhythm. As the night deepens, the fire burns low. A woman begins to tell a story about a beggar who tricked the devil on Christmas Eve. The crowd hushes, leaning in. Her voice rises and falls like music. When she finishes, there's a pause before the whole room bursts into applause. It's strange how easily laughter turns to awe in this place. Before the fire dies completely, the Lord of Misrule stands again, raising his mug. "Tomorrow we return to sense," he says, his grin soft now. "But tonight we've lived like kings." The crowd murmurs agreement. The moment feels tender, almost holy. Outside, snow begins to fall again, fine and glittering. You step out and watch it drift through the torchlight. The world is utterly still except for the faint echo of laughter from inside the tavern. For a fleeting second, you feel that strange balance between reverence and rebellion that defines these people's lives. Even centuries later, scholars still go back and forth on whether this night of chaos strengthened faith or quietly challenged it. Perhaps both are true. After all, in the middle of winter, when the world feels brittle and small, laughter itself might be the truest form of prayer. Dawn creeps softly across the village, a pale light seeping through low clouds. The air feels heavy, carrying the quiet hum of something sacred. The night of laughter and misrule is over, replaced by the still anticipation of Christmas Eve. You can hear the church bell tolling in the distance, its deep voice rolling through the frosted fields. The villagers, bleary-eyed but solemn now, begin to prepare for midnight mass. You walk the familiar path to the church, boots crunching on the thin crust of ice. Your breath rises like smoke in the cold. The small stone building waits at the edge of the woods, its roof dusted with snow, its windows flickering faintly with candlelight. Inside, the scent of beeswax and incense drifts through the air, sweet and smoky. The sound of low voices praying reaches you before you even push open the creaking door. Most medieval accounts agree that this night was the true heart of Christmas, when even the poorest souls gathered under one roof to remember a story that had outlived kings and kingdoms. No matter how weary or hungry they were, the villagers came, wrapped in rough wool and faith. The floor is covered in rushes and pine branches, soft underfoot and fragrant. You step inside, and the door closes behind you with a quiet thud that seals out the winter. The church is dim, except for the candles along the altar, their flames dancing like tiny stars. You take a seat beside a woman clutching her infant, her face illuminated by the glow. The priest stands before the congregation, his voice deep but tender as he begins the Mass. He speaks of light entering darkness, of hope reborn in the coldest hour. Even if you don't understand every Latin phrase, the rhythm of it feels like a song you've always known. It's well recorded that the midnight service in small villages was both sacred and social, an event that blurred the line between worship and reunion. Neighbors who might not have spoken all year now shared glances of warmth. For a few hours, everyone was equal under candlelight. The choir begins to sing, their voices rough yet beautiful. The sound rises into the rafters, mingling with the scent of resin and tallow. It fills the small space completely, and you feel it in your chest, a vibration more than a melody. You look around and see faces lifted, eyes closed, lips moving silently in prayer. In this flickering half-light, even the most ordinary people seem radiant. A rather curious custom catches your attention. Between prayers, a group of boys dressed as shepherds moves down the aisle, carrying wooden staffs and singing in their own playful rhythm. They act out the nativity, clumsy and heartfelt. The baby Jesus is nothing more than a bundle of rags, but the smiles on the villagers' faces are genuine. A few laugh softly when one shepherd forgets his line. The priest pretends to frown but hides a smile behind his sleeve. Some researchers note that these impromptu performances were among the earliest forms of folk theatre, born right here in small parish churches. The boundary between devotion and entertainment was fluid, and that looseness gave people a way to feel closer to the divine. After all, faith lived not just in words, but in laughter, in shared warmth, in the faces of friends. You notice how the wax drips slowly down the candles, thick and golden. It pools on the altar like frozen sun. sunlight. The priest raises a chalice, and the congregation kneels. The floor creaks softly beneath the weight of bodies and winter clothes. Outside, wind moans against the walls, but inside there is only stillness. You can almost feel the rhythm of 100 heartbeats, steady and reverent. When the last hymn fades, the priest blesses the people and steps back. For a long moment, no one moves. Then, one by one, they rise, their movements slow and gentle, as if waking from a shared dream. The candles flicker, and shadows dance on the stone walls. You find yourself staring at one candle that burns brighter than the rest, its flame tall and straight, defying the draught that slips through the door. A charming belief from old folk tradition says that if a candle burned cleanly through midnight mass, the family who lit it would have peace all year. If the flame guttered out, misfortune would follow. You notice several people glancing nervously at their candles, holding their breath each time the wind stirs. One woman quietly cups her hands around hers, whispering a prayer. The service ends, and the villagers step out into the cold night. The sky is black velvet, strewn with stars so clear they seem almost close enough to touch. Someone begins to hum softly, a carol that carries through the silence like a lullaby. You join in, your voice low. The sound blends with the crunch of feet on snow, the faint jingle of a donkey's harness, and the distant bark of a dog. Nobody's entirely sure when the first Christmas carols truly began, though some chroniclers credit the 12th century. What matters here is that the music endures. It turns the night into something tender and infinite. As you walk back to the village, your fingers ache from the cold, but your heart feels lighter. You think of the shepherd boys and their crooked staffs, the candle that refused to die, the faces glowing like embers in the half-dark. The world outside might be frozen, but inside, something new has been kindled. When you reach your cottage, the fire has burned low, leaving only red coals. You stir them gently, watching the sparks rise. The room smells faintly of pine and smoke. You sit on your straw bed, listening to the faint echo of the church bell far away. Its rhythm slows, softer each time, until it fades completely. The village sleeps, the stars hold steady, and in the hush that follows, you feel the quiet joy of being alive in the very heart of winter. By the time the first pale light of Christmas morning spreads across the horizon, the village already stirs. The smell of roasting meat drifts through the frosty air, thick and inviting. Smoke curls from every chimney, rising lazily toward a sky that promises snow. You step outside, the cold biting your nose, and see people bustling from cottage to cottage, carrying baskets covered with cloth. The quiet solemnity of last night's mass has shifted into cheerful commotion. Today is the feast, the day everyone has been waiting for. After weeks of fasting, of thin soups and humble prayers, it is finally time to eat. Even the poorest family will have something rich and satisfying, for this is not a day to count coins. You can almost taste the joy in the air. According to surviving manorial records, Christmas Day was one of the few times in the medieval year when labourers could expect permission to rest, eat freely, and visit neighbours without punishment. Lords opened their stores of grain, and the church often distributed bread and ale to those in need. It was, for a brief moment, as if hunger and hierarchy agreed to call a truce. Inside your neighbour's cottage, the air is thick with warmth. A great iron pot bubbles on the hearth, filled with mutton and root vegetables. A slab of pork sizzles nearby, the fat popping in the flames. The table is crowded with trenchers of coarse bread, dried apples, and steaming puddings. Children sit cross-legged on the floor, eyes wide, waiting for their share. A woman stirs a pot of custard thickened with egg and ale, humming softly under her breath. A curious little culinary detail from the period is the habit of baking entire birds inside pies, sometimes even smaller birds inside larger ones. You see one such creation here, its crust golden and cracked, the smell almost dizzying. The baker insists it will bring luck for the coming year if shared evenly among all present. Nobody dares take the largest slice. The feast begins slowly, with a prayer of thanks. Then comes the noise of knives against plates, the laughter of full mouths, and the low rumble of satisfaction. You tear a piece of bread, dip it in broth, and taste the deep, smoky richness of the meat. It feels almost holy to eat this much after so long without. Children dart around, their cheeks flushed from heat and excitement. One boy sneaks an extra sausage and earns a mock scolding from his mother. The room smells of pepper and smoke, and everywhere you look, faces are glowing. For a moment, you forget that most of these people will go hungry again by spring. For now, everyone is rich. According to one 15th century account, even the humblest Christmas table would try to mimic that of the nobility, at least in spirit. There might be spiced wine instead of mead, a wreath of holly on the table, or a single fine dish placed at the center for show. You see the same effort here. Someone has draped their tablecloth with a scrap of embroidered linen borrowed from the church, and everyone pretends not to notice. A peculiar superstition floats around the feast. The first person to spill salt, they say, will have misfortune before next year's harvest. So when a small pouch tips over, every hand reaches to steady it at once. The laughter that follows breaks the tension, but the pouch is tied tighter after that. Halfway through the meal, the door opens, and the parish priest steps inside, brushing snow from his cloak. The crowd quiets respectfully as he raises his hand in blessing. He accepts a cup of ale and takes a long drink before smiling. "A fine meal," he says, "and well deserved." His tone softens, and for a moment he looks less like a man of God and more like one of them. Later, when the tables are cleared, the men gather near the hearth to drink while the women exchange gossip by the window. Someone begins a song about the three kings who followed the star. The melody is uneven, but heartfelt. You join in quietly, feeling your voice blend with theirs. The song fills the small room like a second fire. It remains uncertain among historians whether the tradition of sharing food with strangers on Christmas originated from genuine charity or from obligation to the church. Whatever the truth, generosity feels natural here. As the night deepens, you see families carrying plates of leftovers to their elderly neighbors. Children wrap bits of bread in cloth for beggars who might pass through tomorrow. Kindness, like warmth, spreads best when shared. Outside, snow begins to fall again, thick and soft. The moon glows faintly behind the clouds, and the village looks almost enchanted. From every chimney, smoke drifts upward, carrying the smell of feasting into the night. Somewhere nearby, someone is laughing, a full, hearty sound that echoes off the frozen walls. You stand in the doorway, watching your breath mingle with the smoke. Your belly is full, your hands warm. The night feels endless and peaceful. Behind you, the fire crackles, and the soft murmur of voices continues like the sea. You think of all the winters that came before this one, and all the winters that will come after. For now, though, there is food, there is laughter, and there is light. The world, if only for a night, seems merciful. The fire from last night's feast still glows faintly in the hearth when you wake. The scent of roasted meat lingers in the air, mingling with the sweetness of cooling ale. Outside, the snow has deepened, muffling every sound, so that when you step into the lane, the whole village seems to breathe in silence. Then you hear it, a faint tune drifting from the tavern, the thin, reedy cry of a pipe. The day after Christmas is never quiet for long. You follow the music to the square, where a fiddler stands stamping his boots to keep warm. Around him, a few villagers dance in slow circles, their laughter rising in small bursts of steam. It's said in several medieval diaries that the days after Christmas often became more joyful than the feast itself, as work was still forbidden and drink still plentiful. People found excuses to keep the fires burning and the songs flowing. Inside the tavern, benches are pushed aside to make space for music. The walls are stained with smoke, the beams hung with sprigs of dried holly. Someone beats a drum made from stretched animal hide. the sound echoing off the low ceiling. A woman sings a tune about a ship sailing through frozen seas to find the newborn Christ. Her voice is rough, steady, and somehow more powerful for it. According to a parish record from Norfolk, villagers would spend the second and third days of Christmas visiting one another's homes, sharing what food or ale remained. They called it keeping the feast alive. You can see that same spirit here. Each time someone enters, the crowd cheers, and another mug is filled. No invitation is needed, only the willingness to sing. One curious custom unfolds near the fire. A group of boys forms a circle, each holding a wooden spoon. In the center sits a pot of hot ale laced with spices. They take turns dipping their spoons, but one must pretend to be asleep while another tries to steal his share. When the sleeper catches the thief, the punishment is to sing a carol alone. The laughter that follows is as warm as the drink itself. In a corner, two older men carve flutes from hollow reeds, their fingers working with surprising delicacy. They hand one to a little girl, who blows a shy note that squeaks and makes everyone laugh. The sound fills the room like sunlight. One man said that making music keeps the bad spirits from settling too close to the fire. Whether he means spirits of the dead or just the kind that hide in ale barrels, no one asks. It's well known from local church warnings that priests often frowned on such revelry, calling it profane noise. But even they understood that music was part of what made the season human. When work ruled every other day of the year, song was rebellion. A charming oddity from northern villages tells that musicians who played on Street Stephen's Day had to begin their tune with their backs to the door, or else the music would call in the wind. Here, the fiddler obliges, bows scraping fast as snow swirls outside. His shadow leaps wildly across the wall, thin and long like a ghost caught dancing. The hours pass in a blur of rhythm and laughter. A woman claps in time while stirring a pot of broth, her spoon keeping the beat. A boy stamps his feet beside her, mimicking the fiddler's rhythm. Soon, even those too tired to dance sway where they sit. The air grows thick with heat and smoke, but no one minds. This is warmth earned by joy. Some historians suggest that these gatherings were more than celebration. They were quiet declarations of identity. Music reminded the poor of who they were together, a single heartbeat against the silence of winter. Watching the faces around you now lined, flushed, glowing, you sense the truth in that. By nightfall, the fiddler slows his bow, drawing the last note into stillness. The sound lingers, like breath on glass. The room falls quiet. Then, softly, someone begins to hum. The tune spreads, growing into a carol so gentle that it almost feels like a prayer. The refrain tells of hope that does not end, of spring hidden beneath the frost. You hum too, your voice barely above a whisper. When the song fades, people begin to drift home. The air outside is still sharp, but it no longer feels cruel. You can hear faint melodies echoing from other cottages, each house its own small orchestra. Smoke rises in ribbons through the starlight, carrying the day's laughter up into the sky. As you walk back through the snow, you catch yourself tapping your fingers against your leg, keeping time with a rhythm that won't quite leave you. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once and falls silent. You smile to yourself, half humming, half shivering. It remains unclear among scholars whether these spontaneous celebrations were remnants of ancient pagan music rites or simply the human need to fill darkness with sound. Whatever their origin, they belong entirely to nights like this. The music is gone now, but the warmth stays in your chest, steady as the slow beat of your heart. You reach your door, push it open, and step into the faint glow of the dying fire. The coals pulse softly, as if remembering the song. You sit beside them, letting your eyes close. The last thing you hear before sleep takes you is the wind outside, moving through the trees in a rhythm almost like the fiddler's tune, carrying the memory of the feast into the frozen night. Morning comes with a soft drizzle of snow, the kind that drifts rather than falls. The fields outside the village glimmer faintly in the pale light. Inside, the scent of ashes lingers in the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of yesterday's ale. Christmas still stretches ahead, each day its own small celebration. Today, the talk is of charity, though not everyone agrees on what that word really means. You find yourself following the villagers to the churchyard, where a line has already formed by the doors. The priest stands near the threshold, robes lifted against the cold, blessing each basket that passes. Inside them are gifts, bread, cheese, and a few small coins to be distributed among the poorest families. It is well recorded in parish rolls that every community was expected to perform some act of almsgiving during Christmastide. But the form of it often depended on how much a family could spare and how willing they felt after so many days of feasting. A merchant from a nearby town arrives with a sack of dried peas and a jug of wine. The crowd murmurs its approval, though a few whisper that he does it for show. Charity, after all, carries its own strange pride. You notice one woman quietly slipping a heel of bread into another's hand without ceremony. No blessing, no speech, just kindness, done quickly and without witness. Somehow that gesture feels purer than all the prayers. A charming custom appears among the children. They walk from house to house carrying small branches of holly, singing verses in exchange for scraps of food or coins. It is a sort of game, but also a gentle reminder to the adults that generosity is expected. One child sings off-key and earns not just a coin, but a slice of pie. The laughter that follows rings louder than the church bell. According to a fragmentary sermon preserved in a monastery archive, priests often warned that charity given without humility was worse than greed. Yet even they admitted that public generosity inspired others to do the same. You watch as the villagers gather at the well, trading bits of food and gossip, their hands chapped but steady. The rhythm of giving seems to warm the air itself. Later, back inside your cottage, you help prepare a loaf for the widow who lives by the edge of the woods. The dough is coarse and heavy, but you press a thumbprint into the top, a small mark said to bring blessing. When you deliver it, she invites you in, her cottage dim and smoky. She pours you a cup of thin ale and tells stories of her youth, of winters colder than this one, when charity meant survival. We shared everything, she says softly, because there was nothing else to share. Some researchers note that during the later Middle Ages, acts of giving at Christmas gradually turned from communal duty into gestures of personal piety. People gave to save their souls as much as to help their neighbors. Perhaps both reasons mattered. Watching the villagers today, you sense that even small kindnesses are tangled with hope for mercy. Outside again, the air carries the smell of roasting nuts and pine smoke. Children chase one another through the lanes, waving their sprigs of holly. At one doorway, a farmer stands arguing with his wife over how much grain to give to the church tithe. "We can spare it," she says. "God will see." He scowls but finally nods. The small sack of barley disappears into her apron. It will feed someone else's child before nightfall. A curious little superstition lingers among the villagers. Anyone who refuses to give on Christmas week will find their bread turning mouldy by New Year. The baker swears it happened once to a miserly man, though no one remembers exactly who. True or not, the story works. Even the stingiest hands loosen when reminded. As evening falls, the priest returns to bless the remaining food. His breath fogs in the cold air as he speaks of the Magi who brought gifts to the Christ child. The villagers bow their heads. Behind him, the church candles flicker, their light glinting off the brass of the altar. For a moment, the gold seems to melt into the shadows, as if heaven and earth have traded places. The last offering of the night comes from a young girl no older than 10. She places a tiny bundle wrapped in cloth at the priest's feet. Inside is a single wooden toy she carved herself, rough but careful. The priest hesitates, then kneels and touches her hand. "This," he says, "is the best gift of all." The crowd murmurs softly, and you feel something shift inside you, a warmth that has nothing to do with fire. When the ceremony ends, the people drift home through the snow. The wind has picked up, carrying their voices like threads of song. You walk slowly, watching the glow of windows appear one by one. Each cottage holds its own quiet feast, its own form of gratitude. It remains uncertain among historians whether these rituals of giving truly lessened suffering or merely softened its edges. But for those who live through winters like this, kindness is not an idea. It is bread, shared while it is still warm. Back inside your home, you sit by the hearth and watch the flame dance. You think of the widow, the girl with the wooden toy, the laughter of children singing for coins. Outside, the snow falls steadily, wrapping the world in silence. For a while, you imagine that silence is mercy, that the night itself gives something back. Then you close your eyes, and the sound of the fire becomes a heartbeat in the stillness. The sun struggles to rise through a pale mist, turning the sky the color of old linen. You hear laughter before you even open your door. Outside, children run through the lane, their boots splashing in the slush left by yesterday's snow. Their cheeks glow red from the cold, their voices high and bright. Today belongs to them. While the adults nurse mild headaches and tend slow fires, the young take over the village. You step out into the crisp air, watching as a group of boys chase one another with sticks dressed in ribbons. Each carries a small bag filled with scraps from the feast, bits of bread, roasted apples, and hardened sugar. It is their day to play and perform, and no adult can tell them to stop. According to entries found in a few monastic records, the days between Christmas and the New Year were often ruled by children's games and mock rituals of boy bishops. Some even led processions in borrowed church robes, blessing the adults and collecting coins for their mischief. At the edge of the square, a handful of little girls are building what they call a holy stable. They stack bits of straw, twigs, and small stones into a miniature manger. One of them places a wooden doll inside, wrapped in a scrap of cloth. The others kneel, pretending to sing hymns. Their voices waver and drift, soft as birdsong. You smile, feeling your heart lighten. It's hard to tell where play ends and prayer begins. One curious custom takes shape as the children parade through the streets carrying baskets filled with ash and water. They knock on doors and chant, "Clean your hearth, clean your heart." The women laugh and drop coins or nuts into the baskets. If someone refuses, the children toss a pinch of ash on their doorstep, a small, harmless curse that everyone takes in good humour. A chronicler from Yorkshire once complained that these pestering children disrupted the solemnity of Christmastide, but judging from the joy in their eyes, the village would not have it any other way. The priest watches from the church gate, his expression torn between disapproval and amusement. "Too much laughter," he mutters, though he doesn't stop them. He knows that once the holy season ends, the play will vanish, replaced again by work, silence, and obedience. For now, let them rule their tiny world. By midday, the market square is alive with sound. A group of older boys stage a mock nativity, assigning each role with noisy debate. A rooster becomes an angel. A goat, reluctantly, becomes a shepherd. The performance is clumsy and hilarious. When one boy forgets his line, another improvises. Peace to all, even the reeve. The crowd bursts into laughter, and even the reeve, red-faced and smiling, tosses a coin at their feet. It's well documented in parish writings that children were often the heart of village celebration. While adults honoured saints and rituals, the young turned the season into something closer to wonder. Their games carried echoes of faith, but also the freedom to laugh at it. You notice that even the sternest elders soften as the day goes on. The sound of joy is difficult to resist. A rather curious detail from folklore says that on this day angels walk among the children, unseen but whispering ideas for mischief. Some mothers claim they can tell when a child is touched by the angel because their eyes gleam brighter, their laughter sharper. You look around and think the whole village must be blessed by those invisible visitors today. As evening falls, the laughter begins to fade into quieter sounds. The children gather by the churchyard, holding candles in small clay holders. They light them one by one, their faces glowing like lanterns in the dusk. Together they sing a simple carol about the Christ child sleeping in the cold. The tune is slow and haunting, carrying through the air like wind through bare trees. Adults join in softly, creating a low harmony that seems to warm the night itself. Some scholars still puzzle over whether these childhood processions were meant as religious devotion or as training for adult community rituals. Perhaps it was both a way to teach reverence through play. Watching the small flames tremble in the dark, you sense that the children understand something the adults have forgotten, that joy, when shared, becomes holy on its own. After the final verse, the children blow out their candles and scatter, their laughter trailing behind them like sparks. The square grows quiet again. You linger, looking at the faint wisps of smoke rising from the extinguished flames. The smell of tallow and pine lingers, and for a moment, the air feels sacred in its stillness. When you return to your cottage, the fire has burned low. You stir the embers, and the orange glow brightens the room. You can still hear faint echoes of singing outside, fading as families settle in for the night. On the table sits a small gift, a piece of carved wood shaped like a star. One of the children must have left it. You run your fingers over the rough surface, smiling. It remains unclear among historians whether these village customs of children's play had deeper meaning, or were simply fragments of joy left untouched by the strictness of the church. But it hardly matters. On nights like this, when laughter and faith share the same breath, the world feels softer, lighter. You place the wooden star near the hearth, where it catches the firelight. The shadows around it seem to move gently, almost as if dancing. Outside, the snow begins again, thin and slow, like a lullaby for the world. You sit for a while, listening, until the crackle of the fire fades into the quiet rhythm of sleep. The next morning is grey and still, the kind of day when breath hangs in the air and the sound of footsteps feels too loud. The feasting and laughter have quieted now, replaced by slower movements and lower voices. You wake to the sound of the fire crackling weakly, its last few coals glowing under a bed of ash. Outside, the snow lies untouched, smooth as parchment. It is the perfect day for reflection. You make your way to the hearth, stirring the embers until a small flame takes hold. The light flickers across the room, catching the dried holly that still hangs above the door. Its red berries have darkened, but the leaves remain glossy. You remember how you hung them weeks ago, believing they would guard the house through winter. Looking at them now, you wonder whether it worked, or if their power lies only in the comfort of belief. After a quick meal of porridge and ale, you step outside. The world is silent except for the distant caw of crows. Villagers move slowly through the lane, wrapped in thick cloaks. You follow them toward the church, where the priest has announced a gathering. It is not a service exactly, but a time for shared prayers and stories, a way to fill the gap between holy days. Inside, the church feels different than it did at midnight mass. The air is heavier, scented with old wax and damp stone. People sit in small groups around the hearth at the back, talking quietly. The priest begins with a reading, but soon the conversation drifts. Someone asks whether angels truly walk the earth during Christmastide. Another swears they saw a light in the fields last night that could only have been a sign. The discussion hums softly, half faith, half imagination. According to surviving records from small parishes, these informal gatherings often turned into debates about the nature of miracles and signs. They blurred the line between theology and folklore, between what the church taught and what the villagers had always believed. You can sense that same mixture here, curiosity and comfort woven together. One man speaks of a dream he had during the feast, where a figure in white offered him bread that turned to light. The priest nods approvingly, calling it a vision of grace. An old woman counters with her own tale. A black bird flew into her cottage and refused to leave. then vanished when she whispered a prayer. "A warning," she says, eyes wide. A few nod in agreement, others smile indulgently. A curious little saying circulates during the talk: "No dream comes empty in the days of Christ." It means that every vision, even nonsense, carries some kind of message. You find yourself wondering what your dreams have been trying to tell you. The conversation drifts again, this time toward magic. Someone mentions the old belief that holly leaves can repel witches if burned before sunrise. Another claims the church bell's sound drives away wandering spirits that still roam during the 12 days. The priest frowns but doesn't interrupt. He knows better than to challenge traditions too openly. A scholar writing centuries later observed that medieval peasants often saw no contradiction between faith and folklore. To them, the world was alive with meaning, angels and ghosts, blessings and curses, all part of the same unseen tapestry. You can feel that truth in the room, as if every candle flame listens as well as burns. As the day passes, the priest brings out bread and cheese for all to share. The simple meal turns the debate into something more like a gathering of family than a sermon. People laugh, tease one another, tell stories that shift between holy and humorous. A man jokes that the Reeves donkey brays only at sinners, and everyone roars. Even the priest chuckles, though he mutters a quick prayer after. Outside, dusk falls early. The snow glows faintly blue in the fading light. The villagers step out into the cold again, their breath rising in small clouds. Some carry candles, others carry torches. The procession forms naturally, no command needed. They move together down the lane, singing softly. The carol is simple, a plea for warmth and mercy in the long winter. You join in, your voice trembling slightly in the cold air. When the song ends, the group disperses, each person heading home to their fire. The sound of doors closing echoes through the village, and soon the world is quiet again. You linger a moment, watching the last candlelight fade behind frosted windows. The sky is a deep, velvet grey. Somewhere above, the first snowflakes begin to fall. Some researchers say these mid-festival gatherings were a form of communal therapy, a way to weave faith into everyday survival. Whether that is true or not, you sense something healing in the act of coming together to wonder aloud. Even doubt feels safer when shared. You walk home slowly, your boots crunching softly in the snow. When you reach your cottage, the holly over the door rustles in the breeze, as if whispering a secret. Inside, the fire has died down again. You kneel to feed it new wood, watching the flames flare back to life. For a moment, you listen to the wind outside, its low moan like a distant voice. You think of the old woman's black bird, of the man's dream of glowing bread, of your own quiet questions. The flames flicker, and in their movement you almost see faces forming, stories trying to tell themselves. Then they fade, and only the light remains. You stretch out near the warmth, feeling the last tension of the day slip away. The air smells of wood smoke and faint pine. Your thoughts grow slow and heavy, like snow settling on a roof. Whatever waits beyond this winter, for now, you are safe inside it. The days now begin to blend together. Morning arrives softly, the air thick with mist, and the faint sound of crows echoes from the bare trees beyond the fields. You wake to the slow crackle of the hearth and the smell of smoke in the air. Christmas has not ended yet. It stretches into what everyone calls the 12 days, a span of celebration and stillness before work begins again. You step outside, pulling your cloak tight. Frost clings to every branch, and the roofs sparkle under the dim sunlight. The village feels quieter now, as if the world itself is resting after so much noise and joy. A few children chase each other through the snow, their laughter faint. Dogs bark lazily, too cold to run. It feels peaceful in a way that almost makes you forget the hardship that waits beyond winter. According to old calendars, the 12 days of Christmas were a sacred interval, a time between worlds when the old year faded, but the new one had not yet begun. Work was forbidden, and people filled the gap with food, prayer, and small rituals. The peasants believed these days held a kind of power, when spirits wandered freely and the future could be shaped by small acts. Inside the cottages, the rhythm of celebration continues, though slower now. Families gather to eat leftovers from the great feast. Pies are reheated, bread softened over the fire, ale thinned with water to make it last. The talk is easy, filled with memories of the festival, with laughter about who sang worst or who fell asleep before the last carol ended. The hunger that haunted autumn seems forgotten for a while. A curious custom repeats every morning. The first person to stir the fire must whisper a blessing over the flame. Keep us warm and kind till spring returns. If the fire catches quickly, it means good fortune. If the smoke turns black, it warns of illness to come. You take your turn one morning, breath held, watching the flame flicker uncertainly before it leaps to life. A sigh of relief escapes you. The priest visits often during these days, reminding people to balance celebration with gratitude. He brings stories of saints and miracles, his voice steady and soothing. Some listen, some doze, and others glance toward the door, thinking of the chores they are forbidden to do. He does not scold them. He knows that faith needs rest as much as it needs prayer. In the evenings, groups of neighbors wander from house to house, carrying small lanterns carved from turnips. They sing songs that change slightly with each cottage, verses added or forgotten as the ale flows. You join one such procession, the cold air stinging your cheeks. A boy ahead of you holds a bell that he rings between songs. The sound carries far across the frozen fields, clear and bright. It's well recorded in medieval accounts that these nightly rounds served both devotion and mischief. The singers blessed homes, but also begged for drink, threatening to sing the song of sorrow if turned away. It was half charm, half challenge. The villagers, not wishing for bad luck, always offered something: bread, ale, or a bit of fat for the fire. As you walk through the snow, you notice the stars shimmering above, sharper now that the clouds have cleared. Someone begins a new carol, one you've never heard. Its refrain speaks of warmth hiding under the cold, of kindness buried but not lost. The melody catches in your mind and stays, even after the voices fade. A strange little tradition follows when you return home. Before sleeping, people take a piece of bread, dip it in ale, and leave it by the window for wandering souls who might pass in the night. They say the dead visit during the 12 days, checking on their families. No one truly knows whether to believe it, but no one dares to forget. You set your piece of bread carefully on the sill. Some scholars suggest that these days of extended celebration were as much about fear as joy. The turning of the year was uncertain, a time when people looked anxiously toward the unknown. Filling the nights with fire and music kept that fear at bay. Watching the candle flicker beside your window, you feel the truth of that. By the 5th night, the rhythm of the festival has changed again. The laughter is softer now, the songs fewer. People speak of chores waiting once the holy days end. Fields to mend, tools to sharpen, debts to pay. Yet no one seems eager to move too quickly. There is comfort in this pause, this fragile pocket of time that belongs to everyone equally. Before sleeping, you step outside once more. The snow has stopped, and the moon casts a silver path across the fields. You can see faint trails of smoke rising from each roof, the heartbeat of the village. The air smells clean, edged with wood and frost. For a moment, you imagine the entire world holding its breath. Researchers still discuss whether the 12 days were truly a unified festival or a patchwork of older customs stitched together over centuries. Whatever their origin, they served one perfect purpose: to remind people that even in the darkest part of the year, life could pause without breaking. You return inside and settle by the fire. The bread on the sill remains untouched, though you fancy it looks smaller, as if someone or something accepted your offering. The idea makes you smile rather than shiver. You close your eyes, listening to the faint whistle of wind through the chimney. The world outside waits, patient, frozen, kind for now. The morning dawns pale and windless. You wake to the sound of hooves crunching on the frozen lane. Looking through the narrow window, you see a procession of riders approaching from the east, their cloaks trimmed with fur, their banners limp in the cold air. It takes you a moment to understand what you are seeing. The lord of the manor is coming to visit. You hurry to dress, pulling on your thickest tunic. Outside, the villagers are already gathering, faces flushed from the cold and excitement. The lord's men ride ahead, their horses steaming, their armor glinting faintly beneath the grey sky. Behind them, a cart creaks under gifts of meat, flour, and wine. At its center sits a figure in a heavy cloak of blue wool, his gloved hands resting on his knees. He does not smile, but his presence alone feels larger than life. It is well recorded in household accounts that lords often visited their villages during the 12 days, both to show generosity and to remind their tenants of duty. Gifts were given, but rents were quietly discussed. Favors were bestowed, but power reaffirmed. What looked like kindness was often politics dressed in velvet. The priest meets the procession first, bowing deeply. The villagers follow, though not everyone kneels. A woman beside you mutters that her husband has worked the Lord's fields for years without ever seeing him. Still, when the steward begins to hand out small coins and bits of cloth, hands reach eagerly forward. Gratitude and resentment often share the same breath. A curious little custom unfolds as the Lord dismounts. The reeve presents him with a round loaf of bread sprinkled with salt, a symbol of peace between master and people. He breaks it, hands a piece back, and the crowd cheers. The gesture is practiced and polite, but you notice how quickly the villagers hide their half behind their backs, as if fearing it might be taken again. Inside the manor hall, a feast has been prepared for the Lord and his men. You and the others wait outside, stamping your feet to stay warm, listening to the muffled sound of music from within. Every so often, a servant emerges with a tray of leftovers for the villagers: roasted meat, bread, cups of watered wine. It is more than most will taste again until next winter. The generosity feels genuine in the moment, though you know it comes at a cost. According to an old chronicle from Kent, peasants often used such visits to plead small favours: permission to gather wood, forgiveness for unpaid rent, or the chance to buy an extra acre. The Lord would listen, nodding gravely, making promises that might or might not survive the journey back to his keep. Today, you see the same scene unfold. A farmer steps forward, bowing low, his hat in his hands. The Lord listens, then smiles faintly. "We will see," he says, which means both yes and no. The atmosphere shifts when the musicians step outside. A pair of them, fiddler and drummer, begin to play for the crowd. Children clap their hands, and the villagers form a ring, dancing in the snow. The Lord watches from the doorway, his expression unreadable. Then, perhaps moved by the music, he tosses a coin into the air. A boy catches it and cheers, and suddenly the whole square fills with laughter again. One peculiar superstition circulates among the villagers: whoever catches the Lord's first coin of the year will have luck until the next winter. The boy's mother presses it to her lips and pockets it quickly. "For the house," she whispers. Whether or not it brings luck, it certainly brings pride. As the afternoon fades, the Lord remounts his horse. The villagers bow once more, their voices joining in a rough cheer. The wind picks up, scattering the last of the straw and ribbons from the ground. The blue cloak ripples behind him as he rides away, his procession vanishing slowly into the white distance. When the crowd disperses, the priest and the reeve remain by the well, counting what little was given: a handful of coins, some flour, a promise of repairs to the church roof. It is more than nothing. You watch them for a moment, then turn toward home, your boots heavy with snow. Some researchers still puzzle over whether these lordly visits were truly acts of benevolence or performances designed to remind the poor of their place. Perhaps both are true. Watching the fading tracks of the horses, you sense that gratitude and dependence were inseparable threads in this world. Back inside your cottage, the fire burns low. You pull your cloak tighter and pour the last of your ale into a cup. Outside, the wind howls softly, rattling the door. The faint echo of the fiddler's tune drifts through your memory, mingling with the image of the Lord's coin flashing in the air. For all the distance between rich and poor, music and hunger seem to belong to everyone equally. You sit by the hearth until the last light fades from the window. Somewhere far off, the church bell rings, a slow, hollow sound marking the passage of another day. You close your eyes, letting its rhythm settle in your chest. For a moment, you picture the fields thawed and green again, the same Lord riding past, the same people bowing. Time moves in circles here, not lines, and within those circles, life continues, quiet, persistent, and strangely beautiful. By the next morning, the cold has deepened again. The sky hangs low and heavy, a sheet of dull silver pressing against the rooftops. Frost sparkles on every window pane, tracing delicate patterns that look like the veins of leaves. The air smells faintly of smoke and snow. You hear it before you see it, the sound of voices rising and falling in harmony, moving slowly through the lanes. The carolers are coming. You step outside, wrapping your cloak close around your shoulders. A cluster of villagers approaches from the church, their lanterns glowing like fireflies in the dim light. Each carries a small cup or jug, ready for whatever gift the next household offers. They sing as they walk, the notes simple and bright, echoing off the frozen walls. The rhythm of their boots keeps time with the music. It is well known from many parish accounts that carolling was once both blessing and request. The singers offered good wishes for the year ahead, and in return they expected a small token bread, ale, or a few pennies. To refuse them was to risk ill fortune or at least a bad reputation. Singing for your supper, the old folks called it, though it was as holy as it was hungry. You join the group as they stop at a cottage door. The oldest woman among them lifts her lantern, and the light spills across her lined face. She calls out a greeting, and the group begins another song, their voices weaving together like threads. The door opens, and a family steps out, smiling, holding a jug of ale, a loaf wrapped in cloth. They pour and pass it around, the warm liquid glowing amber in the cold. A charming detail recorded in local traditions tells that each verse of a carol carried a hidden wish. The first for health, the second for wealth, the third for peace, and the last for love. You can hear those wishes in the melody now, soft and hopeful, rising into the still air like a prayer. The procession moves on, leaving laughter behind. At the next house, a farmer joins in, his voice booming so loudly that even the birds startle from the trees. Children run beside the group, shaking small bells and giggling. One boy trips, spilling his handful of crumbs into the snow, and another quickly helps him gather them again. Even the smallest loss feels worth mending tonight. According to an old fragment of verse found in a monastery library, some of these songs were once far rowdier, full of jokes and half-forbidden stories. Priests complained that villagers mixed holy verses with tavern refrains, turning worship into revelry. Yet the people refused to stop. The line between sacred and joyful was too thin to matter. By mid-afternoon, the singers are flushed with cold and drink. The sound of their songs fills the air, winding through every lane. You can hear them even from the fields, faint but clear, a human warmth threading through the frozen distance. The village seems to glow from within. At one doorway, a woman invites everyone inside to warm themselves. Her cottage smells of apples and smoke. She offers each person a slice of spiced bread, its surface glistening with honey. The carolers thank her with a special verse, one meant to guard her home from illness and fire. God rest ye kindly, they sing, and keep your hearth from harm. She wipes her eyes and presses a coin to their hands. A curious superstition says that if a singer forgets the final verse of a carol, the spirits of the season will visit him in dreams to teach it properly. Whether anyone believes this or not, the youngest boy insists on remembering every word. His small, serious voice cuts through the crowd, steady as the flame of a candle. As the light fades, snow begins to fall again, fine as flour. The lanterns glow brighter against the dark. The group stops by the church for one last song. The bell tolls softly above them, and the melody slows, shifting from merriment to something almost reverent. The final notes hang in the air long after the last voice falls silent. Some historians suggest that caroling in medieval villages was more than music. It was a form of binding, a way to stitch a fragile community together through shared sound. Listening to the fading echoes now, you feel that truth. The songs linger like warmth on the skin, proof that even the poorest hearts can make beauty out of breath. When the carolers finally disperse, you walk home through the quiet lane. The snow muffles every sound except the faint crunch of your boots. A few lanterns still flicker in doorways, and from inside one cottage, you hear someone humming the tune again, softer this time, almost like a lullaby. At home, you sit by the hearth, lighting a small candle and setting it near the window, just as your mother once did. The flame wavers gently, casting golden light across the room. Outside, the snow continues to fall, silent and endless. You sip the last of the ale given by the singers and close your eyes. The taste of honey and smoke lingers on your tongue. It remains uncertain to scholars whether the songs of this time were acts of worship, rebellion, or both. But perhaps the answer does not matter. What endures is the sound, the human voice rising through the cold, defying the silence, reminding the night that it is still alive. The snow has turned to a thin crust of ice by morning, glinting like broken glass in the faint Sunday. The air feels sharper now, quieter too. It is the day of oaths, when the villagers gather near the old stone cross in the square to swear peace for another year. Every cough, every murmur, echoes off the frozen walls. This is not a feast day, not a prayer, but something older, weightier, ritual to keep neighbors from turning against one another once the long cold ends. You pull on your cloak and join the slow-moving crowd. The cross stands at the center of the village, worn smooth by generations of hands. Its base is dusted with snow, its edges chipped from time and frost. The priest waits beside it, holding a book that looks too fragile for this cold. The reeve stands nearby, his breath rising in white clouds, looking more nervous than holy. According to manorial rolls from the 14th century, these midwinter oath gatherings were part law, part ceremony. Each household had to appear, not to worship, but to confirm their loyalty to the Lord, to the church, and to one another. It was a way of resetting the fragile balance of peace after weeks of revelry and drink. The crowd forms a circle. The priest raises his hand for silence. His voice carries easily in the still air, deep and deliberate. He begins by reciting names, calling each family in turn. When yours is spoken, you step forward and place your hand on the cold stone of the cross. It burns with frost against your skin. "I keep the peace," you say, repeating the words he gives you. Around you, others murmur the same promise, some fervently, some half-heartedly. One curious tradition survives in this ceremony. After each oath, a pinch of salt is placed at the base of the cross. Salt is precious, yet every family brings a little. It is said to preserve not just food but faith. The priest sprinkles holy water over it, and the droplets hiss faintly in the cold. The villagers watch in silence, their faces pale under the grey sky. An elderly man steps forward, leaning heavily on his staff. He hesitates before speaking, his voice thin but firm. "Peace is not words," he says. "It is deeds." A ripple passes through the crowd. The priest nods slowly, perhaps recognizing truth when he hears it, even if it does not come from Scripture. Once all the oaths are made, the mood lightens. The reeve announces that anyone who wishes may share bread at the well as a sign of friendship. Women unwrap loaves still warm from the hearth. The smell of yeast fills the square, rich and comforting. Neighbors trade pieces of bread, pressing them into one another's hands. "For luck," they say. The exchange feels simple, yet deeply binding. A charming superstition ties to this custom. If two people share bread by the village cross and mean their peace sincerely, no quarrel between them will last through the year. But if one lies while breaking bread, the loaf will crumble before the next planting season. You notice everyone handling their slices carefully. No one wants to test it. The priest blesses the crowd again, though this time his voice is softer. The ceremony is over, but no one rushes to leave. Instead, people linger in small clusters, talking quietly. Children chase one another through the snow, their laughter floating through the crisp air. A few men begin to clear the frozen well, striking at the ice with wooden poles. The rhythmic sound fills the silence, steady as a drumbeat. It is recorded in several old church registers that oaths taken in winter were believed to hold special strength. The cold, they said, sealed words more firmly than warmth ever could. Watching the villagers now, you can almost believe it. The breath of each speaker turns to mist, rising and disappearing, yet somehow the promises remain. When the crowd finally begins to disperse, the priest stays behind, collecting the leftover salt from the base of the cross. He wraps it carefully in a cloth and places it inside his robe. That salt will bless the fields at planting time, linking this day of peace to the hope of spring. The cycle continues. You linger a little longer, running your hand over the stone. Its surface is rough, its coldness steady. You think of all the hands that touched it before yours. Hundreds, maybe thousands each, leaving a fragment of warmth behind. The thought feels oddly comforting. Some modern historians suggest that such ceremonies were less about faith than about survival. In small communities, a single feud could destroy the fragile balance of life. These oaths, half spiritual, half practical, reminded people that cooperation was not a choice but a necessity. Looking around at the faces of your neighbors, you sense that everyone here knows it too. By afternoon, the clouds begin to thin. The light turns golden, faint but soft. You walk home through the snow, your feet crunching in the hush. Smoke rises from every chimney, curling lazily into the cold air. The village looks calm, almost content. Inside, the fire waits. You sit beside it, rubbing your hands together, thinking of the bread you shared and the words you spoke. Whether they carry divine power or not, they feel solid inside you, a small warmth against the chill. Outside, the wind sighs gently around the eaves, and the sound feels less like a warning and more like a promise kept. The following evening arrives with a strange, charged quiet. The air feels heavier, and the snow underfoot seems to muffle even the sound of breathing. Torches flare at the edge of the village, their light turning the frost to gold. Tonight is a night for masks, a night when the living pretend to be spirits, when the villagers trade faces and names to confuse the darkness that prowls between the years. The mumming play is about to begin. You walk toward the square, your cloak brushing against drifts of snow. The smell of pitch and smoke fills the air as men light more torches along the lane. A crowd has already gathered, their laughter soft and uncertain. A rough stage has been built beside the well, just a few planks laid on barrels, but it looks grand enough in the flickering light. Someone beats a drum to gather attention. It is well recorded in local chronicles that mumming plays were part theatre, part ritual, performed during Christmastide and the turning of the year. The players wore disguises and acted out scenes of death and rebirth, usually ending in a clumsy miracle or a loud resurrection. No one knew exactly where the custom began. Some said it was a Christian story of sin and salvation. Others whispered it was older still, a remnant of forgotten winter rites. The first actor steps forward, wrapped in an old cloak turned inside out, his face painted white with soot around the eyes. He bows dramatically, earning a laugh from the crowd. "Good evening, friends and foes alike," he shouts. "For tonight the dead rise to remind the living how to live." Applause erupts and the play begins. One curious custom of the mummers is that they never speak their real names while in costume. They are only the parts they play: the king, the fool, the knight, the devil, and the doctor. To break character is bad luck. You watch as the fool dances clumsily, jangling a belt of tin bells around his waist. The devil enters next, brandishing a wooden pitchfork and howling so loudly that children hide behind their parents' legs. The laughter that follows is relieved and loud. The story unfolds in chaos. The knight boasts of courage. The devil challenges him. The king orders a duel, and before long the knight lies dead on the snow. The crowd gasps, even though everyone knows what comes next. The doctor appears, a pot of ale in one hand and a bundle of herbs in the other. "Fear not," he declares, "for no man truly dies when there's drink enough to wake him." He pours ale over the fallen knight's lips, and after a few dramatic twitches, the man jumps to his feet to cheers and clapping. According to several surviving scripts from medieval mumming plays, this moment of resurrection was the heart of the performance. It was not just humour but hope, a promise that even in the coldest winter, life could return. Watching the villagers now, you understand why the story endures. Laughter, faith, and survival all blur together under torchlight. A delightful oddity occurs when the fool turns toward the priest, who stands in the crowd trying not to smile. "Bless us, Father," the fool calls, "for we have sinned in advance." The audience erupts with laughter. Even the priest laughs then, shaking his head. The boundary between sacred and ridiculous has melted completely. A few of the villagers join in spontaneously, pulling scarves over their faces and leaping into the circle. They improvise lines, pretending to be wandering ghosts demanding a share of ale. The actors respond with mock blessings, sprinkling them with snow as though it were holy water. The scene collapses into laughter, but no one minds. In this small chaos, every heart feels light again. Some researchers have argued that mumming was more than entertainment. It was a communal charm against despair. By enacting death and revival, villagers turned fear into farce. The devil was tamed with jokes. Mortality was mocked until it lost its edge. You can feel that truth in the air tonight. The torches flicker, faces glow, and for a few hours the village belongs to joy. When the play ends, the crowd claps and throws bits of bread and nuts to the players. The mummers bow, their painted faces gleaming with sweat and snow. Someone starts another drumbeat, and the people begin to dance in the open space, stamping their feet to stay warm. The rhythm fills the night. The fool leads the way, spinning wildly, his bells jingling with every step. As the celebration fades, the torches burn lower. One by one, families drift home through the snow. You linger near the stage, watching the actors remove their masks. Without the paint and the soot, they look ordinary again. Farmers, herdsmen, neighbors. The transformation feels like magic in reverse. It remains uncertain among historians whether these plays were born from ancient pagan rites or simple peasant humor. What is clear is that they gave people a voice when life offered little else. In laughter, they found defiance. In pretending to die, they remembered how to live. You walk home through the darkness, the echoes of drums still faint behind you. The snow crunches beneath your boots, and the air feels strangely clear, as if the world has been washed by laughter. When you reach your door, you pause and look back. The last torch by the well still burns, its flame small but steady, flickering against the night. It seems to breathe, alive and stubborn, like the heart of the village itself. The snow outside has softened overnight, turning to slush that glistens under a dim sky. You wake to the familiar scent of smoke, bread, and something sweet cooking on the hearth. Today the air in the cottages hums with the sound of women's voices, overlapping like birdsong. The men have gone to check the animals, leaving the houses in their wives' command. This is their realm now, and it smells of cinnamon, gossip, and heat. You rise and step outside, the cold biting your face, and see women moving briskly from cottage to cottage, skirts tucked up, hands red from kneading and scrubbing. The feast days may have slowed work for the men, But the women's labor never really ends. They rule the fires that keep the village alive. Without them, no bread would rise, no stew would simmer, no warmth would hold through the night. It is well recorded in household accounts that women in medieval villages were the keepers of both hearth and law. They measured time not by the priest's sermons but by the rhythm of boiling pots and turning seasons. Their work was invisible in the eyes of history, but in practice, it was the pulse of life itself. Inside one cottage, you see a group of women gathered around the fire. The air is thick with steam and laughter. A large pot bubbles in the center, filled with what smells like mutton, onions, and herbs. A young woman sprinkles in a pinch of salt with a flourish. "For love," she says, and everyone laughs. The older woman beside her, her hair streaked with grey, stirs slowly and replies, "For patience, I'd say." A curious custom plays out here. As each woman adds an ingredient, she names a virtue, strength, kindness, luck, health. The stew becomes not just food but a kind of charm. It is said that whoever eats it will carry the blessings into spring. The men claim not to believe it, but they never refuse a bowl. While the pot simmers, the talk turns to stories. One woman recounts how her grandmother saw lights in the sky on Christmas night, dancing above the church tower like small suns. Another tells of a goose that laid a perfect round egg on the morning of Mass, which the priest declared a miracle. A third woman, more practical, mutters that it probably froze solid before anyone could eat it. Laughter ripples through the room. According to records from parish courts, much of what we know about women's lives comes from these domestic spaces, half-forgotten notes of idle chatter, or immodest songs overheard by clerks. Yet what the scribes dismissed was often the glue that held the village together. Here, gossip is not sin, it is survival. It keeps information moving faster than the Reeves orders ever could. A rather endearing superstition emerges as the bread comes out of the oven. Each loaf is tapped 3 times on its crust before slicing, to chase away hunger from the door. You watch the women do it automatically, murmuring a quick phrase under their breath. Stay full, stay kind, stay safe. It feels older than any prayer the priest recites. The children tumble in and out of the room, laughing, snatching crumbs, and dodging mock scolds. One little girl drops her piece of bread into the ashes, and before anyone can stop her, she blows on it and eats it anyway. The women roar with laughter, one saying, "If she lives through that, she'll live through anything." The fire pops loudly, as if agreeing. As afternoon fades, the men begin to return, stamping snow from their boots. They follow the smell of stew, filling the room with their bulk and voices. The women serve them bowls without fuss, then sit back, exchanging small smiles. The men praise the flavor, not realizing the meal carries whispered blessings hidden in its steam. One scholar who studied village customs centuries later remarked that kitchens were as much temples as churches. Around every fire, decisions were made, alliances forged, and small acts of rebellion passed as recipes. Watching the women tonight, you understand that truth completely. Their laughter holds more authority than any sermon. When the meal is done, the children drift to sleep near the hearth, their faces warm and content. The men move outside to smoke and talk of fields and taxes. Inside, the women remain, their conversation turning low and thoughtful. One asks whether the year ahead will bring good harvests. Another answers, "It depends on whether we remember to sing while we work." The oldest woman reaches toward the fire, tossing in a handful of dried herbs. The flames flare green for a heartbeat. "For health," she whispers, almost too softly to hear. The others nod, their faces lit by the glow. It is not magic exactly, but something close. Faith built from repetition, hope shaped by habit. Outside, the wind rises, whistling faintly through the eaves. You feel its cold touch even by the hearth, but it cannot drown the warmth in this room. The women continue to talk, their voices weaving through the crackle of the fire. It remains uncertain among historians how much of these customs were superstition and how much practical wisdom disguised as charm. What matters is that they worked meals filled stomachs, stories filled hearts, and laughter filled the dark. When the last pot is cleaned and the fire settles, you step outside. The night smells of smoke and baking. A faint light glows in every window, small fires guarding the village against the cold. You walk slowly through the snow, thinking of the stew, the laughter, and the steady strength of the women who keep everything alive. Morning comes with a dull grey sky that presses low over the fields. The frost has turned the earth to stone, and even the river lies quiet beneath a thin shell of ice. You wake to a strange silence, the kind that feels both peaceful and heavy. The laughter of the last few nights has faded. The village moves slower now, its energy spent. The holy season still lingers, but beneath it lies the weight of ordinary hunger, waiting to return. You push open your door. The cold rushes in, dry and biting. The world looks like a painting in shades of white and pale blue. No one speaks loudly today. You pass neighbours carrying small bundles of wood or scraping frozen earth for water. Their movements are careful, almost reverent, as though they fear breaking the quiet. According to early parish writings, this stillness after celebration was often described as a holy hush. It was the day when the world seemed to pause between blessings and burdens. Some called it the breathing day, a time when both heaven and earth took rest before the new year began. Watching the smoke drift lazily from the chimneys, you can almost feel that deep exhale. Inside your cottage, the fire struggles to stay alive. You add a few pieces of wood and sit close, listening to the soft crackle. The warmth touches your face, but not your fingers. The smell of old ash mixes with damp wool. You sip from a cup of watered ale, its taste faint but comforting. A curious custom fills the day for those who can afford it, the fast of silence. People eat little, speak less, and reflect on what the year has given and taken. In your village, it has become more habit than law. The priest says the quiet pleases God, but many think it simply makes the next feast taste sweeter. You decide to follow it anyway, letting your thoughts wander instead of your tongue. Through the window, you see a woman sweeping the threshold of her cottage, careful not to let any dirt cross inward. The old saying claims that if you bring yesterday's dust into the new year, bad luck will follow. She sweeps with slow, steady strokes, her face calm and focused. Small rituals like hers keep the world stitched together. By noon, snow begins to fall again, soft and endless. It blurs the boundaries between roofs and fields, turning everything into a single, silent plain. Children stay indoors, huddled by the fires. The streets empty. For once, no one calls or sings or argues. It feels as if the whole village has been folded into one long sigh. You step outside anyway, boots sinking into the fresh snow. The sound of your steps feels loud in the emptiness. The only other movement comes from a small figure near the churchyard. It is the widow you visited earlier in the week, scattering crumbs for the birds. They flutter around her in a dark cloud, wings brushing against her hands. "Even the smallest must eat," she says softly when she sees you. Her voice sounds thin in the cold air. According to an account written by a monk in the 15th century, some villagers believed that feeding animals during 12 days brought blessings to the giver. The creatures, they said, carried those blessings upward on invisible wings. True or not, the sight of the widow and her birds feels right, like a prayer made without words. As the light fades, you return home. The sky glows faintly pink where the sun sinks behind the trees. The first stars appear, trembling above the horizon. Inside, the fire has died to coals, glowing like buried rubies. You kneel to stir them and watch the sparks leap into the air, tiny and bright. A rather tender tradition accompanies this night. Before sleeping, each family burns a small bundle of herbs in the hearth: rosemary for memory, sage for strength, and a sprig of holly to guard against misfortune. The smoke fills the cottage with its sharp, clean scent. You close your eyes, breathing it in, imagining it driving the stale air of the year away. Some scholars think these customs were remnants of older solstice rites, stripped of their pagan names but not their meaning. Others argue they were simply acts of cleanliness and comfort. Whatever their origin, the feeling they leave behind is one of quiet renewal. The village is utterly still now. Outside, snow covers every roof, every fence, every field. The moon rises, pale and cold, turning the world to silver. You sit by the fading fire, your mind empty and calm. There is nothing to do, nothing to fix, only to wait. In that waiting, you find a strange kind of peace. The silence no longer feels heavy but gentle, like a blanket drawn over a sleeping body. Tomorrow the noise will return, the songs, the work, the endless cycle of survival, but for now, the quiet belongs to you. You lie down beside the hearth, pulling your cloak over your shoulders. The embers glow faintly through the half-dark. You listen to the slow rhythm of the wind, to the faint rustle of the birds outside. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings once, then falls silent. It remains a matter of speculation among historians, whether this day of stillness was deliberate devotion or simple exhaustion. Perhaps it was both. In a world built on labor and faith, even rest had to earn its meaning. The last of the fire dies into darkness. The smell of herbs lingers in the air, sweet and smoky. You close your eyes, feeling warmth where there is almost none, and let the silence cradle you into sleep. The morning arrives wrapped in fog so thick it blurs the edges of everything. The fields, the cottages, even the church spire seem to drift like islands in a grey sea. You step outside and breathe in the damp air, heavy with the scent of wood smoke and thawing snow. The quiet feels fragile, as if one sharp sound could break it. The days of festival are nearly gone now, and with them comes the slow return of work. But before that, there is one more day of old belief and quiet superstition. In every cottage, people watch the signs of the morning with careful eyes. If the first fire burns cleanly, it means good fortune. If the first loaf cracks in the oven, someone will fall ill. You find your neighbors already reading omens into the smallest things: a barking dog, a broken jug, the direction of the wind. It may sound foolish, but here, where life hangs so closely between plenty and hunger, every sign feels worth heeding. According to early chronicles, these last days of Christmas were known for their superstition. Villagers believed the veil between luck and disaster was thin until the new year began. The priest called it nonsense, yet even he checked his candle for dripping wax before his sermon. The habit of watching for signs ran deeper than doctrine. Inside your cottage, the fire burns unevenly. You kneel to stir it, whispering a quick blessing taught by your mother. Burn steady, burn kind, burn through the year. The words slip from your lips easily, half prayer, half memory. The flame steadies, as if listening. You smile, feeling a small relief that reason cannot explain. Later that morning, a few villagers gather near the well. They speak quietly, their voices low and serious. A pot cracked in the night, and a family's cow gave no milk. Both are taken as bad omens. The reeve shakes his head and spits into the snow, muttering that fear feeds faster than truth. Still, when the priest passes, he sprinkles holy water over the well just in case. A curious little tradition comes into play today. People leave a small piece of bread or cheese at their doorstep before dusk. They say it pleases the kind ones, unseen spirits who guard homes from misfortune. If the food is gone by morning, luck will follow. If it remains, someone has offended the invisible guests. You place your own piece carefully on the step, half amused and half anxious. As the day continues, small accidents feed the talk. A woman drops a bowl, and it shatters across the floor. A child finds a bird dead against the doorframe. A cart loses a wheel on the icy road. Each event draws murmurs of meaning. It's the year turning, someone says. The world shakes loose its dust before the new begins. It is recorded in an old collection of parish folklore that peasants believed the earth itself could speak during these days, if only one listened at midnight. Some claim to have heard it sigh or murmur under the snow, a voice too deep for words. You wonder if it is true, or if people simply heard the cracking of ice and gave it meaning. Either way, the idea stays with you. By late afternoon, the fog begins to thin. The sky opens in streaks of pale gold. You walk through the lane, past the churchyard, where the last garlands of holly droop with melting frost. Children have built small snow figures, their faces made of pebbles and bits of straw. One leans crookedly, its head tilted toward the ground as if listening to something hidden below. The air grows colder again as the sun fades. Smoke from the chimneys rises straight into the sky, undisturbed by wind. You can smell roasting meat and the faint sweetness of baked apples. Families are finishing the last of their feast supplies before the year's fast begins again. You pass a window and glimpse a family holding hands before the meal, their heads bowed in silence. A peculiar superstition survives about this hour. They say if you sit in total quiet as the year's end approaches, you might hear whispers of what the next year holds. A cough means illness. A knock means a visitor. A faint bell means marriage. You decide to listen, if only for curiosity's sake. You sit by your fire, letting the sounds of the village fade. For a moment, you hear nothing but the ticking of the cooling wood and the faint whistle of wind through the thatch. Then a small creak, like a door opening far away. You smile to yourself, wondering which neighbor's luck just walked in. Scholars still puzzle over whether these superstitions reflected genuine belief or simply a way to give order to uncertainty. In a world ruled by frost, chance, and hunger, perhaps imagining signs gave people a feeling of control. Watching your fire flicker now, you understand that comfort has its own kind of truth. Outside, the fog returns, wrapping the village in soft grey again. You place another log on the fire, its crackle loud in the hush. The bread on the doorstep waits untouched, its crust glistening with frost. The wind sighs faintly against the walls, neither friendly nor cruel, just present. Before you sleep, you whisper the same words again to the fire. You do not know if they hold power, but the flame burns brighter, steady, and sure. In that small light, the dark feels less like a threat and more like a blanket. Tomorrow the signs will fade, and the new year will begin. Tonight, you simply listen, letting the silence settle gently over everything. The first sound you hear that morning is not the church bell but the low hum of animals stirring in their stalls. The village smells faintly of hay and frost, and the air carries the sweet tang of dung and damp wool. Today belongs to the beasts, a day set aside to bless the animals that share the barns, the roads, and the lives of the villagers. You pull on your cloak and step outside. The snow has crusted over again, crisp underfoot. Thin curls of smoke rise from the barns, where the farmers have already started small fires for warmth. In every doorway someone holds a bowl of grain, a scrap of bread, or a handful of salt. It is a day of gratitude, though it looks nothing like the solemn ceremonies of the church. It is recorded in several old accounts that on this day peasants offered food and drink to their livestock, thanking them for the labor and milk that had sustained the year. The practice may have come from pagan roots or from early Christian compassion, but no one in the village argues over its origin. Tradition is reason enough. You follow the others to the main barn near the square. The animals snort and stamp as people enter, the warm, moist air steaming in clouds. The cows are brushed and garlanded with bits of ivy, the sheep dabbed on their foreheads with drops of ale, and the horses rubbed down until their coats shine. The priest appears with a sprig of evergreen dipped in holy water. His Latin prayers mix with the soft sounds of chewing and the occasional impatient bleat. A charming detail recorded by one 15th century observer describes how peasants once whispered wishes directly into their animals' ears during this blessing. You watch as an old farmer leans close to his ox, murmuring words that no one else can hear. When he steps back, his eyes are wet. Perhaps he asked for strength, or forgiveness, or simply another year without loss. Children dart among the stalls, laughing as they sprinkle crumbs for the hens. One girl feeds her family's pig, a crust of bread soaked in ale, declaring, "He's earned it more than my brother has." The laughter that follows fills the barn with warmth no fire could match. According to a traveller's journal from the time, this blessing of beasts blurred the line between the sacred and the familiar. It reminded people that creation was shared, that humans and animals depended on the same mercy. Looking around the barn, you can see that truth alive in every breath of steam, every soft snort and rustle of straw. Outside, the men lead the animals one by one around the church, circling it 3 times. The sound of hooves and bells echoes across the frozen fields. Each circuit, they say, protects the herd from sickness for another year. The priest follows, muttering prayers and shaking his evergreen branch. Drops of holy water freeze as they fall, tiny beads of glass on the animals' coats. A curious superstition lingers about this ritual. If any beast refuses to complete the 3rd circle, it means the creature will not live to see next winter. You watch nervously as one cow balks near the corner, stamping and tossing its head. The owner coaxes it gently until it moves again. Relief spreads quietly through the crowd. No one speaks the fear aloud. When the procession ends, everyone returns to the barns to share a simple meal. Bread soaked in milk, apples roasted on sticks, and a little ale passed from cup to cup. Even the animals receive a taste of sweetness. A mare nuzzles her master's shoulder as he feeds her a piece of apple, his voice low and fond. "Good girl," he says. "Keep me warm and I'll keep you fed." One chronicler who witnessed this custom centuries later called it a rustic communion. Watching it now, you understand why. There is no separation here between gratitude and necessity, between blessing and work. The same hands that slaughtered last week now stroke in thanks. It feels honest, even beautiful in its simplicity. By mid-afternoon, the light fades. The barns grow quiet except for the soft sound of chewing and the creak of timbers. Outside, snow begins to fall again, slow and steady. You step out into the whiteness, the cold air clean after the heavy warmth of the barn. The priest walks past you, his robe damp from the melted snow. "They are holier than we are," he says softly, nodding toward the animals. You smile but say nothing. He may be right. Some historians suggest that this day's rituals were remnants of ancient midwinter offerings, reshaped by the church to fit new words but old feelings. Others think it was simply compassion made habit. Whatever the truth, you feel its weight in your chest as you head home. When you reach your cottage, you find your own small offering waiting. The family's cat curled beside the fire, eyes half closed, purring in rhythm with the crackle of wood. You tear a piece of bread and drop it beside her. She does not open her eyes, but begins to eat, slow and content. Outside, the snow thickens, blurring the edges of the world again. Inside, the warmth spreads. The day has passed quietly, yet it feels full, heavy with peace. You lean back, listening to the cat's soft breathing, the wind against the roof, and the faint lowing of cows in the distance. The village sleeps under white silence, every creature, great and small, wrapped in the same calm. The snow stops sometime before dawn, leaving the world glazed and glittering. You wake to a pale light slipping through the shutter cracks, the air so still that you can hear the faint creak of the trees outside. The holy season is nearly over now, yet something older stirs beneath it. The talk around the hearths has turned to dreams, to omens, to things that existed long before priests came with their Latin blessings. Today, the villagers whisper, is the day when the old gods still walk unseen. You pull on your boots and step into the cold. Frost cracks under your feet like thin glass. The church bell rings once, though no service is called. People move quietly through the lanes, faces turned toward the woods, as if watching for something that never quite appears. The air feels strange, filled with both reverence and fear. According to a few surviving chronicles, the church once tried to forbid the pagan echoes of the season, but the customs never truly vanished. They lingered like roots beneath the snow, feeding on memory. Villagers still lit fires in secret places, still spoke to trees, still left offerings where the priest's eyes could not follow. You can feel that wildness in the air today. At the edge of the village, near the frozen stream, a small group gathers around a stump blackened by old fires. They carry bowls of grain and cups of ale. A young man steps forward, pouring his ale onto the ground. "For what was before," he says quietly. The others nod and follow, scattering crumbs and seeds into the snow. A few cross themselves afterward, just in case. A curious detail from medieval folklore tells that during the 12 nights, spirits of the old world, what some called the wild hunt, rode through the sky, searching for warmth or worship. Anyone who heard their horses and looked up would be taken, unless they dropped face first into the snow and whispered a prayer. You look up now, half expecting to see movement in the grey clouds. Nothing stirs, but the air feels alive. The priest passes by later in the morning, pretending not to notice the wet circle in the snow where the ale was poured. He speaks instead of saints who tamed storms and beasts, stories meant to fold the old fears into safer shapes. Yet even he admits that certain things cannot be reasoned away. God made the forest, he says with a small shrug, and what hides there too? Inside the cottages, the women hang bits of evergreen over the windows again, not for decoration now, but for protection. Children press cloves into apples and tie them with string, little charms against mischief. The scent fills the rooms, sharp and sweet. Someone recites an old rhyme about keeping the hearth bright and the shadows at bay. The words sound almost like music. A delightful superstition lingers from these nights. People say that if you stay awake long enough to see the first hour of dawn, the spirits cannot harm you. So the families light extra candles and tell stories to pass the time. You join one such gathering, sitting near the hearth as an old woman recounts a tale of the river that once froze around a traveller's heart. Her voice trembles, not from age but from memory. No one dares interrupt until she laughs softly and says, "It melted by spring." Some researchers of medieval religion have noted how these fireside tales blurred the lines between the sacred and the forbidden. People did not think in categories of faith and heresy. They lived in both worlds at once, trusting whatever kept them warm and safe through the cold. Listening now, you understand how belief is not always something learned but something felt in the bones. Outside, the wind begins to rise. It rattles the shutters and hums through the thatch. The fire flickers, then steadies. You glance toward the door, half expecting it to open on its own. A dog whines softly, ears pricked toward the sound. The old woman nods, calm. "It's just the riders passing," she murmurs. No one questions her. When the wind dies, the air feels softer, almost kind. Someone adds another log to the fire. The flames leap higher, filling the room with golden light. You sip from a cup of warm ale, feeling its sweetness spread through your chest. For a moment, you forget the fear and remember only the warmth. It remains uncertain among historians how much of these lingering customs truly came from pagan ritual, and how much were simply peasant poetry stories shaped to give meaning to winter's dark. Whatever their origin, they remind you that faith wears many faces, and all of them belong to the same human hope that life will return. Before you sleep that night, you open your door for a moment. The snow shines faintly under the moon. The air is still, yet it carries a hum, as if the world itself is breathing quietly. You leave a small candle on the threshold, its flame trembling in the cold, and whisper a few words you half remember from childhood. The light flickers but does not die. You stand watching until the wind takes your breath, then close the door gently. Inside, the candle's glow seeps under the frame, casting a thin line of gold on the floor. It feels like protection, fragile but real. You lie down beside the hearth, listening to the faint crackle of the fire. Outside, the forest sighs in the dark, and somewhere deep within it, the old gods, if they still exist, keep their distance, content with being remembered. The morning sky opens wide and colourless. a pale sheet stretched across the horizon. The snow has stopped, but the air holds its breath. You wake to the smell of smoke and the distant sound of metal striking metal. The men are already outside, preparing the ploughs. It is Plough Monday, the day when the tools of the fields are blessed for the coming year, though the ground is still too hard to break. Today is about hope, not harvest. You step into the cold, pulling your cloak tight. The fields glimmer with frost, every furrow glinting like a silver line. A few men stand near the church, their hands resting on the handles of wooden ploughs polished smooth by years of use. The priest walks among them, sprinkling water from a clay bowl, his breath clouding the air. "May your work be light and your yield be heavy," he says, his tone more weary than solemn. It is well recorded in medieval farming manuals that this blessing of the plough marked the true end of the Christmas season. After this, the holy days were finished, and labour began again. The peasants treated it with both reverence and reluctance. Work meant life, but it also meant the long grind of survival. A curious custom follows the ceremony. After the priest's blessing, the youngest men in the village pull a decorated plough through the lanes, dragging it from house to house. It is wrapped in ribbons and greenery, and at its front walks a boy dressed in scraps of bright cloth. He shakes a small bell and calls out blessings for every doorway. In return, villagers offer coins or ale to ensure good fortune for their crops. If someone refuses, the ploughmen threaten to carve a furrow across the offender's doorstep. No one dares test the joke. As the procession moves through the village, laughter returns to the frozen air. The men sing a rough song, their voices deep and cheerful. You follow behind, watching as snow sprays up from their boots. A few children run ahead, pretending to guide invisible oxen. The rhythm of the chant is simple and infectious. God send good seed, God send good sun, God send the work till the harvest's done. A delightful oddity of this day involves the women. They carry small bundles of seed tied with twine, which they scatter into the snow, whispering the first sowing charm of the year. The seeds vanish into the white ground, swallowed by frost. "Feed the earth before it feeds you," one of them says softly. The line feels ancient, older than the church itself. According to accounts written by travelling friars, some villages used to mark Plough Monday with dances that blended prayer and mischief. The dancers wore masks of animals and spirits, stomping through the streets to wake the sleeping soil. A few of your neighbours imitate that now, stamping their feet and waving sprigs of ivy. Their breath rises like smoke in the cold, their laughter echoing against the stillness of the morning. The priest pretends not to see. Perhaps even he understands that faith alone cannot wake the fields. Hope needs rhythm, and rhythm needs laughter. After the ceremony, the plough is stored again, its wooden body gleaming with melted frost. The villagers gather by the tavern for hot broth and ale. Inside, the air hums with contentment. The talk turns to plans for spring, to the fields that flooded last year, and the barley that came up thin. The men argue about when the frost will break. The women exchange small gossip about new calves and stubborn husbands. One curious superstition is shared quietly among them. It says that if the first furrow of the year is drawn crooked, the harvest will falter no matter how hard the work. The reeve declares that he will make that first cut himself when the thaw comes, and everyone nods solemnly. Yet someone mutters that it's not the plough's line that matters, but the heart of the one guiding it. The sentiment lingers, gentle and true. A chronicler from the 16th century once described this day as a marriage of faith and labour. Watching the villagers now, you can see why. Their devotion is not to distant saints but to the soil beneath their feet. Blessing the plough is blessing their own hands. By late afternoon the sky begins to pale toward blue. The snow softens underfoot, and droplets slide down the eaves. The sound of water dripping fills the air like the first faint note of spring. You walk along the edge of the fields, your boots sinking slightly into the thawing crust. The earth beneath smells rich and cold, full of promise. You pause at the far hedge, looking back toward the village. Smoke curls upward from the chimneys, thin and straight. In the distance, the priest stands alone near the church door, his hand resting on the plough. The sun glints weakly off the blade, turning it for a moment into something like gold. Scholars still debate whether Plough Monday began as a Christian ceremony or as a remnant of older, agrarian rites that once honored the sleeping soil. Perhaps both stories are true, intertwined like roots. What matters most is the faith in the act itself, the belief that touching wood and earth with care can call life back to a frozen world. You walk home slowly, your breath clouding the air, your fingers stiff from cold. Behind you, the fields stretch quiet and waiting. Ahead, the light of your cottage glows faintly through the frost. Inside, a fire waits, and beside it, a loaf of bread and a cup of ale. You sit down, tired but peaceful, listening to the faint crackle of the fire. Outside, the snow continues to melt, drop by drop, as if the land itself has begun to stir. The village wakes later than usual, wrapped in the grey hush that follows a week of snow. Smoke curls lazily from every chimney, slow and thin against the pale sky. Today the air carries a different kind of energy. The holy days have ended, the plough has been blessed, and the long stretch of winter now yawns ahead. But for this single day, work pauses again. It is a day for games. You step outside into the brittle cold and see the men gathering near the tavern, stamping their boots to keep warm. The sound of laughter rises in short bursts. The reeve stands beside a small table, holding a bundle of dice in one hand and a clay cup in the other. Around him others argue, wager and grin. For a few hours there will be no talk of rents or tithes, only the rattle of dice and the ring of laughter against frozen stone. It is well recorded in parish notes and court fines that gaming was both condemned and inevitable in these days after the festival. The church forbade dice and cards, calling them gateways to sin, yet priests themselves were often found throwing a quick game in secret. For peasants, games were the only rebellion they could afford, the chance to play with fate when fate usually played with them. One curious custom makes the scene livelier. The first player to roll double sixes must buy a round of ale for the others. When a farmer throws the lucky number, the crowd cheers, banging their mugs together until foam spills over. The reeve laughs and calls it divine justice. He's blessed by the saints, someone shouts, and another answers, or cursed by his purse. Beside the dice game, a circle has formed for wrestling. The ground is hard and slick with ice, making every movement risky. Two young men face each other, barefoot despite the cold, their breath rising in white clouds. The crowd counts the seconds until they lunge, hands locking around shoulders, boots scraping for grip. When one finally topples the other, the onlookers erupt in applause, stamping and shouting until the victor helps his opponent to his feet again. According to a traveller's diary from the 15th century, such contests were common after Christmas. They proved strength and courage, but also unity. Even the loser earned respect for showing his spirit. Watching the wrestlers now, you see that truth gleaming in their smiles. The competition is fierce but never cruel. It feels like life condensed into a moment, hard, brief, but filled with laughter. A group of women gathers near the well, playing a quieter game with bones and pebbles. They toss small stones into the air, catching them with practiced hands, their movements fast and graceful. A little girl tries to join them and drops every throw, laughing until her breath catches. The older women cheer her anyway. The rhythm of the pebbles striking the ground fills the air like music. One woman hums a tune as she plays, a melody that sounds both playful and solemn. It is said in old folk tradition that games held during midwinter carried blessings for luck, and losing could even be a good sign. Better to lose in sport, she says, than in life. Her neighbours nod, taking the superstition as fact. By midday, the tavern door swings open and the smell of hot stew drifts into the cold. Inside, the air is thick with heat and noise. Men slap each other's backs, women shout jokes across the room, and someone begins a song about a miller who tried to outdrink his donkey. The chorus is loud and off-key, but that only makes it better. A delightful detail preserved in a 16th century poem describes how villagers often bet not only coins, but small favors, loaves of bread, patched gloves, even promises of help in spring planting. Luck shared is luck doubled, the saying goes. You see that in action now as a man who has lost every game smiles while the winner hands him back his wagered scarf, saying, "You'll need this more than I will." Later in the afternoon, the games grow bolder. A group of boys set up a target against the wall of the tavern, tossing small bones to see who can land closest. Their laughter rings through the square. An old man tries his hand and misses entirely, declaring with mock solemnity that he will never gamble again. The crowd cheers anyway. Outside, the sun slides lower, casting long blue shadows across the snow. The voices grow softer, the energy fading into warmth and contentment. Even the reeve relaxes, leaning against the tavern wall with a mug in his hand. For once he looks less like an overseer and more like one of them. Some scholars still debate whether these winter games were a brief act of rebellion against authority or simply a way to remind villagers that joy could exist within hardship. Watching the faces around you, you sense it might have been both. Play is its own kind of prayer, a small defiance against the cold and the weight of labor. When the last dice roll is done and the last song fades, people begin to drift home. The snow glows faintly under the moonlight, marked with footprints and laughter that seem to linger in the air. You walk slowly back to your cottage, your hands cold but your spirit light. Inside, the fire burns low. You sit beside it, still hearing the echoes of dice rattling in the cup, and the rhythm of laughter rising like music. The wind moves softly through the eaves, and you smile. Perhaps tomorrow will bring frost, perhaps hunger, perhaps another year of toil. But tonight, the village has remembered how to laugh at fate, and that may be the greatest victory of all. The next morning arrives with a thin drizzle that turns the snow to grey slush. The lanes are slick, the roofs dripping steadily, and the air smells faintly of wet hay and smoke. You wake to the sound of someone knocking on a door nearby, followed by a chorus of laughter. It takes a moment before you remember what day it is. It is the day of gifts, the one when neighbours visit one another to exchange small tokens of kindness before the year truly begins. You pull on your cloak and step into the soft rain. The village looks muted, but alive. Children run barefoot through puddles, carrying small bundles wrapped in scraps of linen. Their cheeks are pink with cold, their voices shrill with excitement. Every doorway opens to the sight of smiles and steaming mugs. The air carries the scent of ale and fresh bread, the smell of something simple but deeply human. It is well recorded in local accounts that peasants called this the Giving Day, though no one could quite agree on its proper name. The Lord called it a feast of charity, the priest called it almsgiving, and the villagers called it simply our turn. After the lords and priests had given their blessings, the common people gave to one another, not out of duty but affection. You make your way toward the square, where a table has been set up under an awning of rough cloth. On it sits a pile of small gifts: wool mittens, tiny loaves, carved spoons, dried apples, ribbons, and a few bright pebbles polished smooth. People come and go, taking one thing and leaving another. No one guards the pile, and no one takes more than one. It is a quiet exchange of trust. A curious custom unfolds at the well. A group of girls lower their small offerings into the water on strings, letting them sink halfway before pulling them up again. They say the well spirit blesses gifts dipped in its depths. One girl's ribbon comes up caught on a small piece of ice, glittering like glass. The others squeal and call it a sign of good fortune. The priest, watching from a distance, sighs but says nothing. Inside the tavern, the warmth gathers. The smell of roasted onions fills the air, and mugs of hot cider pass from hand to hand. A fiddler plays in the corner, his tune slow and soft. Neighbours who argued in autumn now sit side by side, sharing bread. No debts today, someone says, and everyone nods. For one day the scales of fairness tip in favour of kindness. A rather lovely superstition accompanies the giving. If you give something made by your own hands, luck will return threefold. If you give something taken or borrowed, the luck will flee. You see a woman hand her friend a pair of mittens she knitted herself. The friend presses them to her chest and smiles. The gesture feels more sacred than any sermon. According to a letter written by a travelling monk, these small acts of exchange were often dismissed as rustic nonsense. Yet he admitted that no place felt warmer than a village on this day, when no door stayed closed and no hand stayed empty. Watching the scene before you, you understand that this warmth is not in the gifts themselves, but in the giving. Outside, the rain slows, turning to mist. The air is full of movement again. A boy runs up to you, thrusting a small wooden charm into your hand. It is shaped like a bird, rough but carefully carved. "For travel," he says proudly, then dashes away before you can reply. The wood feels smooth against your palm, the kind of gift that carries more time than material. You wander the lanes as afternoon fades, seeing candles burning in every window. A few songs drift through the air, quieter now than during the feast days, but no less heartfelt. One melody, sung by a group of women near the well, speaks of gratitude for bread, for breath, for another morning to wake. The tune feels like the closing of a circle. A charming tradition takes place at dusk. Everyone gathers by the church with their remaining gifts. The priest says a short prayer of thanks, and then the children run forward to offer their treasures to the poor or to travellers passing through. You see one small girl hand her only apple to a stranger wrapped in a tattered cloak. He bows his head and accepts it as though it were gold. Some historians later argued that these days of small exchange reflected the truest form of medieval charity, kindness between equals. There was no hierarchy in this giving, only the quiet understanding that everyone had something worth sharing. As the crowd disperses, you return home with the little wooden bird still in your hand. The fire is burning low, and the sound of the rain has faded to a soft drip from the eaves. You set the carving on your table, beside the loaf of bread waiting for supper. Its shape catches the firelight, the wings half open, as if ready to lift. You sit and eat slowly, tasting the simplicity of the food, feeling the gentle calm that follows generosity. Outside, a bell rings once from the church, marking the final evening of the season. Tomorrow, work begins again, debts return, and life resumes its old rhythm. But for now, the village is at peace. It remains uncertain among scholars whether these humble customs of giving grew from religious duty or from something older and more instinctive. Perhaps both. What endures is the same truth that guided every season. Warmth shared is warmth kept. You lie down beside the fire, watching the faint reflection of the bird's shadow on the wall. Its wings seem to flutter with the flicker of the flame. You close your eyes and listen to the slow heartbeat of the house, steady and content. Outside, the rain has stopped completely, and the village sleeps in quiet grace. By the next morning, the rain has cleared and the air smells faintly of thawing earth. The snow has retreated to the edges of the fields, leaving patches of brown soil peeking through like wounds slowly healing. Smoke drifts lazily from the chimneys, and the first sound you hear is the steady rhythm of axes splitting wood. The village, after weeks of celebration and song, has begun to return to its old heartbeat. You step outside and see people already at work. A farmer sharpens his plough blade, testing the edge with his thumb. A woman kneels by the doorway, patching a torn basket with straw. Even the children, who only days ago chased one another through snow, are carrying bundles of sticks. The season of leisure is over, yet there is no sorrow in their faces, only focus, a quiet acceptance of the rhythm that rules their lives. According to surviving manorial records, this period immediately after the Christmas festival was known as the setting days. It was the time when villages slowly transitioned from holy rest back to labour. No bells rang for feasts now, no carols echoed from the tavern. Instead, there was the music of work, the creak of cart wheels, the chop of wood, the hiss of boiling water. A curious custom marks this return to normal life. Before sunrise, each household lights a new fire, taking a spark from the ashes of the old one. It is said that the way the flame catches predicts the spirit of the coming year. If it burns quickly, good fortune will follow. If it smokes or sputters, troubles will linger. You strike your flint and wait, holding your breath until the spark leaps. The fire catches at once, the orange glow spreading through the hearth. You exhale in quiet relief. As the day brightens, you walk to the well. The ice that sealed it for weeks has finally broken, the water gleaming dark and still. Women gather there with buckets, their reflections shimmering like ghosts. One woman drops a coin into the water and whispers a wish. "For strength," she says when she notices you watching. "We'll need it before the spring." You nod, understanding perfectly. A rather touching superstition surrounds these coins. They must not be retrieved until the year's first harvest, when the water has warmed again. Whoever finds the coins later is said to receive the blessings of all who made wishes there. Whether anyone believes this or not, the sight of shining silver at the bottom of the well gives comfort through the cold months ahead. Later, the reeve gathers everyone near the square to assign winter tasks. His voice carries clearly in the thin air. Some will mend the fences, others will check the grain stores or repair the church roof. The men grumble, the women roll their eyes, but beneath the noise there is a shared understanding. Work is a kind of safety. To have a task is to have a purpose. Inside the tavern, the fire roars again, but now the talk has changed. Instead of songs, there is planning. Which fields to sow first, which debts to settle, which tools to borrow. The sound of hammers rings faintly from the far end of the village, where the blacksmith has returned to his forge. Sparks leap through the open door like fireflies. A lovely bit of folklore says that if a blacksmith strikes his first spark of the year before noon, the whole village will have strong fortune. You wander past his workshop just in time to see him raise his hammer. The spark bursts from the anvil, bright and fierce. The onlookers cheer softly, not out of superstition but out of habit. It is good to begin with light. According to notes in a priest's sermon book, many clergy urged people to keep the spirit of Christmas alive even as they returned to their work. "Labor with joy," one wrote, "for joy feeds the soul as bread feeds the body." You see traces of that sentiment in the way people move today, tired but gentle, slower than before, yet still singing under their breath. By midday, the sun breaks through the clouds, weak but real. You follow the path to the fields beyond the village. The snow melts in thin rivulets, trickling into the ditches. Crows pick at the stubbled ground, their calls echoing through the open air. A few men are already clearing stones from the soil, their breath rising in rhythm. Each thud of a shovel feels like a heartbeat, steady and sure. A scholar once wrote that this transition from celebration to labor was not a return to drudgery but a return to meaning. The peasants understood something most of the world forgets. Joy and work are threads of the same cloth. Watching them now, you sense that truth unfolding again in front of you. As evening settles, you return home. The fire burns stronger now, its light steady and warm. On the table lies the small wooden bird given to you days before. You pick it up, turning it in your hand. Its wings catch the firelight, and for a moment it seems to move. You set it on the windowsill, facing outward toward the fading sky, as though keeping watch for the spring. Outside, the last light glows faintly pink against the snow. The air smells clean again, rinsed by rain and smoke. Somewhere in the distance, a cow lows, answered by the faint bark of a dog. Life continues, quiet and constant. Some historians note that this shift from festivity to labor marked the true strength of medieval peasant life, their ability to hold joy and hardship in the same hand without breaking. As you sit by the hearth, listening to the crackle of wood, you understand how that balance kept the village alive through centuries of winters. The warmth of the fire spreads through the room, and your eyelids grow heavy. You listen to the soft sigh of the wind against the thatch, the heartbeat of the season slowing once more. The festival has ended, but its warmth remains, carried in every spark, every shared task, every quiet breath of hope that waits for spring. The sky glows faintly blue at dawn, the kind of pale light that arrives without warmth. A thin mist curls across the fields, clinging to the trees like breath that refuses to fade. The village moves slowly today, as if the people themselves are waking from a long dream. The festivals, the games, the laughter, all have passed. What remains now is reflection. It is the day the villagers call simply the remembering. You open your door to still air and quiet streets. A few figures move between cottages, carrying candles and baskets of bread. No one speaks loudly. The snow crunches underfoot, sharp and final. You follow the path toward the church, where the doors stand open, spilling a soft golden glow into the cold. Inside, the space feels smaller than usual. The rushes have been swept clean, and the air smells faintly of wax and damp stone. A few villagers kneel in silence, their breath fogging faintly in the chill. The priest stands at the altar, reading softly from his book, though most of the congregation listens more to their own thoughts than to his words. According to surviving parish customs, this day of remembering served as both closure and renewal. It marked the official end of Christmastide, when the people gave thanks for surviving another winter and honoured those who had not. For peasants, it was not a time for mourning but for gratitude, a promise that life would keep going, even when the snow tried to stop it. You light a candle at the small side altar, the flame trembling as you set it down. Each family does the same. Soon the church flickers with dozens of tiny lights, their reflections shimmering against the stone walls like stars trapped indoors. The warmth from the candles gathers slowly, chasing away the chill. A curious custom accompanies the ritual. Each person whispers a single word into the flame, a hope or memory they wish to carry into the new year. The words are not shared aloud. You hear only the soft hiss of wax and low rustle of cloth. Some say these whispered words rise to heaven. Others believe they sink into the stone beneath the altar, where the dead can hear them. You do not know which is true, but both feel possible. After the last prayer, the priest extinguishes all but one candle, the living light. It burns quietly on the altar, a single reminder that warmth persists. He speaks then, not as a sermon but as a story. He tells of the child born in the dark who grew to teach that small kindnesses outlast empires. His voice wavers, not from weakness but from sincerity. When the people leave the church, the sunlight has grown brighter. The snow glitters like glass. One by one, the villagers return home, still holding pieces of bread blessed during the ceremony. Each bite, they say, ensures good health through the rest of winter. You eat yours slowly, the crust hard but sweet, tasting of smoke and salt. At midday, the priest walks from house to house, carrying a bowl of ash mixed with melted snow. He marks each doorway with a faint grey cross. The gesture is simple, a blend of prayer and protection. "May your home stay warm," he says to each family. Some reply with, "And may your hands stay steady." Others simply smile. According to local belief, these ashes carry the memory of every fire burned since the first day of Christmas. To scatter them at the threshold binds the household to its past, reminding all who enter that warmth must be tended, not taken for granted. Watching him mark your door, you feel that truth settle deep in your chest. The afternoon passes quietly. Children build small figures of snow and decorate them with twigs and berries, pretending they are saints or angels. A group of women bake thin oatcakes, each marked with a small cross before being placed on the griddle. The smell drifts through the lanes, soft and comforting. When the cakes are done, they share them freely, one to every hand that passes. A rather gentle superstition says that if you eat your oatcake before speaking to anyone, your year will be peaceful. So the lanes are silent for a while, filled only with the sound of chewing and snow melting. Then laughter begins again, hesitant but real. It feels like the first hint of spring disguised in winter's mouth. Some historians suggest that this final day of remembrance blended Christian liturgy with older seasonal customs, a mingling of faith and folk memory. It was, in essence, a way for people to make sense of time itself, to close one circle before opening another. Standing now at your doorway, watching the villagers move through the fading light, you can feel that circle tightening gently around you too. As evening falls, smoke rises in pale ribbons above the cottages. A faint pink glow lingers on the horizon. The priest passes once more through the lanes, carrying the last flame from the church. He stops at the crossroads and lifts the candle high. The wind bends it but does not extinguish it. "Go with peace," he calls softly. The light remains. You return home and sit by your fire, the last embers of the season flickering low. The small wooden bird on your sill catches the candlelight, its wings reflecting the glow. You think of every sound, every smell, every kindness of the past weeks. You think of laughter, of frost, of bread shared between strangers. It remains uncertain whether these closing rituals were meant to please God, comfort the soul, or simply remind the living of their endurance. Whatever the reason, they work. The quiet feels different now, less like emptiness, more like rest. Outside, the stars begin to show, sharp and clear. You take one final look at the sky before closing your door. The air inside is warm, the light steady, and the long night ahead feels less like an ending than the gentle beginning of another turning year. The morning comes softly, carrying the faint gold of sunlight across the frozen fields. The air feels lighter than it has in weeks, washed clean by melting snow. A steady dripping fills the silence as icicles surrender to warmth, one drop at a time. When you step outside, the ground glistens with water, and the wind smells faintly of earth instead of smoke. For the first time in a long while, it feels like winter has begun to loosen its hold. You walk through the lane and see neighbors standing in their doorways, watching the slow thaw. The village looks changed in the new light, less trapped and more awake. Dogs bark lazily, chickens scratch at the slush, and the first raven of the day calls from the church roof. It is not yet spring, but you can feel its promise somewhere just below the surface. According to an old chronicle, peasants believed that the last days of winter held a fragile magic, the power to shape what came next. Whatever you said, thought, or gave during these days would echo through the rest of the year. So the villagers speak kindly, move slowly, and treat even small moments with care. A few men stand near the field's edge, staring at the ground as if waiting for it to breathe. One of them kneels, pressing his palm against the damp soil. "It's waking," he says quietly, his voice full of wonder. The others nod, their faces thoughtful. They know it will still be weeks before the frost is gone, but hope needs no calendar. Inside the cottages, fires burn low again, not from scarcity but from comfort. Great feast logs have long turned to ash, and now the smaller sticks give steady warmth. Women open windows to let in fresh air, shaking out blankets and scattering herbs to scent the rooms. The air smells of rosemary, juniper, and wood smoke, clean, sharp, alive. A curious little custom returns in this in-between season. Children go from house to house with bits of charcoal wrapped in cloth, offering to share the last fire with neighbors whose hearths have cooled. In return, they receive bread or an apple. The idea is simple. Warmth travels best when it is shared. You watch one child run through the lane, clutching a glowing coal in a metal spoon, her face bright with pride. By midday, the village gathers by the well. The ice has fully broken, and water flows again, dark and shining. People take turns filling buckets, dipping hands, splashing faces. Someone laughs, and others follow. A woman bends to wash her palms and murmurs, "New year, clean hands." The phrase spreads quickly, repeated with smiles as if it were a spell. According to a forgotten fragment of local verse, Washing in the first thawing water was thought to drive away sickness and sorrow. Whether or not it worked, it gave people a moment to feel reborn, at least for a heartbeat. You dip your own hands in the icy water. It bites sharply at first, then warms as your blood rushes back. The sensation is both painful and cleansing. The priest joins the crowd later, walking with less authority and more ease. He carries a small jug of holy water, sprinkling a few drops into the well. "To bless what blesses us," he says simply. The villagers nod. Faith and need have learned to share the same language. As the afternoon passes, the sky brightens into a rare, pale blue. The thaw continues, turning the lanes into ribbons of mud. Children run through puddles, their laughter echoing off the church walls. A few men begin repairing fences toppled by snow, hammering in rhythm to an old song about planting and patience. The sound rings across the fields, like the first pulse of life returning to the land. A scholar once wrote that peasants understood time, not as a straight road, but as a circle that folded upon itself. Watching them now, you see that wisdom at work. Each season does not replace the last, but carries its memory forward, a quiet promise that the world keeps healing itself if you give it time. As the sun lowers, the village gathers once more at the edge of the square. A fire has been lit in a shallow pit, fed with scraps of old wood and dried rushes. Everyone takes a turn tossing something into the flames: a splinter of the Yule log, a withered wreath, a burned-out candle. The smoke rises straight into the still air. "For endings," someone says softly, "and for beginnings too." The fire crackles, the smell of pine and ash mingling with the chill. For a moment, no one speaks. Then a child hums a simple tune, the same carol sung on Christmas Eve weeks ago. Slowly the others join in, their voices low but steady. The melody fills the square, winding upward with the smoke until both vanish into the pale evening sky. It remains uncertain among historians whether this closing fire was a true medieval ritual or a later embellishment by memory. Yet the gesture feels right. It ties the circle closed: the cold, the feast, the laughter, the silence, all folded into one last shared flame. As night settles, you walk home, your boots sinking into soft mud. The stars appear one by one, faint at first, then brighter. The air smells of wet soil and renewal. Inside your cottage, the hearth glows faintly. The small wooden bird still sits on the sill, its surface warm from the firelight. You touch it lightly before lying down. The village outside is quiet again, resting between seasons. For the first time in many weeks, the silence feels natural, not imposed by cold or fear. It feels like a pause before a deep breath, the earth gathering strength to bloom again. You close your eyes to the sound of melting water, steady and soft, like time itself whispering that nothing truly ends. The air has changed. It is still cold, but not the biting cold that cracks skin and freezes breath. It feels gentler now, touched with the faint scent of mud and distant rain. The last snow lies in shallow drifts under the hedges, grey at the edges where meltwater has begun to eat through. The birds return first. Their calls cut through the morning like threads of sound, stitching the world back together. You step outside and see your breath fade quickly in the soft light. The sun sits low, but it glows with warmth instead of glare. The fields shimmer faintly with dew, and thin shoots of green poke through the soil where frost once ruled. It is still too early to plant, but not too early to hope. The village feels lighter, quieter in a new way. Not the silence of waiting, but the calm that follows survival. The priest stands near the church gate, speaking to a few villagers who listen more out of respect than obligation. He tells them to give thanks for endurance. His words drift upward, carried by the same breeze that stirs the branches above. When he finishes, the people nod, not solemnly, but with the small, easy smiles of those who have seen enough hardship to know what gratitude really means. According to one old account, peasants marked this final day of the Christmas season by stepping outside at dawn to face the east. They would whisper their thanks to the sun, promising to keep faith through another year of toil. You lift your eyes toward the pale horizon, feeling the same impulse. The light there is thin but steady, glowing against the chill like a promise kept. A curious little custom follows the dawn prayer. Each family sweeps their doorstep clean, brushing away the last ashes of winter. The motion is slow and rhythmic, more meditative than practical. A woman across the lane finishes her sweeping, then scatters a pinch of grain across the threshold. For luck, she says to no one in particular, and for whatever comes. The grain glitters in the early sun before sinking into the melting snow. Inside your cottage, the fire burns low and steady. The rushes on the floor have been changed, fresh and green. The smell of pine needles fills the air. On the table sits the wooden bird, now faintly polished from your hands. Its wings catch the light from the window, and for a moment it almost looks as though it might fly. You tear a piece of bread and dip it in warm ale, eating slowly. The taste is simple and clean. The walls seem to hold the memory of the past weeks, the laughter, the songs, the smell of meat and candles. Outside, life is already shifting toward work again. You can hear the muffled sound of hammers, the low murmur of voices planning for the thaw. The rhythm has returned. A gentle superstition lingers from this day. People say that if you keep one candle burning until the last night of Christmastide, no darkness will find your house before spring. You light yours again, watching its small flame tremble. It seems almost to breathe. You think of how many candles have burned in this village, in all villages, holding back the long, dark one flicker at a time. According to a note in a monk's calendar, this day was once called the resting of the light. It marked the moment when celebration gave way to endurance, when gratitude became labor again. Yet he also wrote that it was his favorite day of the year because it was the one that asked for nothing but quiet faith. Sitting by your fire now, you understand him completely. The afternoon passes gently. A few children play in the lanes, pushing small wheels of ice with sticks. Their laughter drifts like music, rising and falling in the still air. A group of men repair the broken fence by the field, their hammers echoing in rhythm. Life goes on, piece by piece, as it always has. Some historians later wrote that medieval peasants lived small lives, ruled by frost and faith. But watching this quiet day unfold, you know their world was not small at all. It was vast, filled with moments like this, simple, steady, and sacred in their ordinariness. Every act of sweeping, of mending, of lighting a candle was its own kind of prayer. As the light fades, you step outside once more. The sky burns softly pink and gold above the roofs. Smoke rises in straight columns, carrying the last breath of winter into the open air. You look toward the fields, where the ground glows faintly under the setting sun, and you can almost imagine the first shoots of spring stirring below. The bell rings once from the church tower, slow and low. Its sound rolls through the village, not as a call but as a farewell. The holy season has ended, but the life it sheltered continues. You stand quietly until the echo fades, then turn back toward home. Inside, the candle still burns. The wooden bird keeps its watch by the window. You sit by the fire and feel the weight of the season lift, leaving behind only warmth. The air hums softly with the memory of laughter and the promise of work. You close your eyes, letting the peace of survival sink deep. Perhaps historians will argue forever about the meaning of these festivals, about whether they were born of faith, of hunger, or of habit. But sitting here, you know what they truly were. The art of endurance made joyful. The village learned to dance inside its hardship, to turn cold into comfort and darkness into light. The candle flickers one last time before settling into a steady glow. Outside, the wind moves gently through the bare branches, carrying the faint scent of thawed earth. The year begins again, quiet and endless, waiting for its next story to be told. The fire burns lower now, its glow soft and steady against the dark. You lean back, listening to the faint crackle, the whisper of wood surrendering to warmth. Outside, the wind has stilled. The world feels wrapped in quiet.